Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back nearly 2,000 years, to a world where olive oil lamps flicker against marble walls, where sandals slap softly on mosaic floors, and where a whisper of incense curls through the atrium air. You're standing in ancient Rome, and somewhere down a winding alley, you can already hear music, pipes and flutes, laughter, and the faint rustle of silk. It's a wedding night in the Roman Empire. And spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive the social pressure. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through Rome's moonlit streets, passing taverns where merchants argue over debts, and temples glowing faintly like sleeping beasts. Somewhere in the distance, a wedding feast roars on. Laughter, applause, the clink of bronze cups. Marriage here isn't about two people finding love. It's about families forming alliances, fortunes merging, and reputations surviving. You step closer to the laughter and realize, beneath all the pomp, there's still a human pulse. The Romans had three main types of marriage, each as distinct as the togas on their backs. The oldest was confarreatio, a sacred ceremony for the elite, complete with priestly blessings and the symbolic sharing of a spelt cake. Then came coemptio, literally a purchase, where the bride was symbolically bought by her husband in front of witnesses, a transaction thinly disguised as romance. Finally, the most common, iunctio, happened simply when a woman lived with a man for a year. No cake, no priest, just time. And maybe a neighbor's gossip to make it official. You can't help but chuckle at that last one. Imagine your modern relationship status updating automatically after 12 months of shared laundry and bad cooking. Congratulations, you are now legally wed by inertia. Still, iunctio marriages carried real weight. They reflected how the average Roman lived, without grand estates or lavish ceremonies. The empire thrived on practicality. Love was a nice bonus if it showed up. Historians still argue whether affection was truly absent or just quietly present, hidden behind duty and decorum. You slip into the peristyle courtyard where the wedding is in full swing. Torches line the walls. Musicians pluck lyres near the fountain. The bride, dressed in white wool, wears a flame-colored veil, the flammeum, to symbolize purity and the fires of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. The groom, somewhat tipsy, lifts a cup of wine and toasts Jupiter for blessing this union. Around them, guests chant teasing verses, half blessings, half jokes. You notice something endearing. Despite the strict customs, there's laughter, real laughter. Parents beam with pride, kids sneak honey cakes from trays, and an uncle starts a dance he clearly shouldn't have attempted after his fifth cup. For a moment, it feels less like an alliance and more like a celebration of being alive in a world built on order and chaos. Marriage in Rome tied into everything: religion, law, politics. Without it, families couldn't pass on property, and society couldn't function. Even the gods were thought to favor those who upheld the marital bond. The goddess Juno Regina presided over marriage and childbirth, and every wedding began with prayers to her. Some Romans even believed that saying her name out loud on your wedding day could protect your union from curses. Not everyone followed that superstition, though. The more skeptical would shrug and say, if Juno cared, she'd have married better herself. In the corner, a group of women gossip about the bride's dowry: linen, jewelry, perhaps a few slaves. You realize that love might be secondary, but the logistics are meticulous. Every gift is recorded, every promise sealed by family witnesses. The Roman legal system didn't trust passion. It trusted paperwork. And yet, there's something human here that transcends time. The bride's mother brushes away tears. The groom's father stands stiffly but smiles. Two families merge with all the hope and fear that come with any new beginning. Later, as the party thins out, you follow the couple through torchlight. The groom pretends to abduct his bride, an ancient custom meant to recall the legendary kidnapping of the Sabine women. It's half joke, half ritual. Neighbors cheer as she's carried over the threshold of her new home, her veil glowing orange in the torchlight. For her, this isn't just a doorway, it's a line crossed forever. Inside, she places 3 coins at the household shrine, one for the gods, one for the spirits of ancestors, and one for her husband's protection. She touches the hearth, whispering a prayer that her marriage will be fruitful and her children healthy. You can feel the weight of expectation pressing down like Roman marble. She must now embody the virtues of modesty, loyalty, and silence. Outside, laughter fades. A distant dog barks. The night settles. You glance at the couple, awkwardly sitting side by side for the first time as husband and wife. Their hands brush briefly, uncertain but sincere. You wonder, maybe love begins here, not in grand gestures, but in quiet endurance. And as you step back into the cool night, the empire hums around you. Millions of people bound by contracts, rituals, and whispered hopes. Marriage in Rome isn't just a private affair, it's the skeleton of society itself. The Senate debates its laws, poets praise its heartbreaks, and priests guard its purity. Somewhere, a philosopher named Seneca is writing about virtue in marriage, while a mischievous poet named Ovid is already planning a poem on how to cheat without getting caught. The Roman world, you realize, contains both, a craving for order and a thirst for chaos. The torches sputter. You feel the heat fade from the marble beneath your feet. Tomorrow, there will be another wedding, another contract, another pair of strangers learning to share a life. And you, standing quietly among the shadows, begin to understand that Roman marriage, for all its ceremony, was never just about survival. It was about building something that could outlive you. You wake the next morning to sunlight cutting through painted shutters and the faint clang of metal from a nearby workshop. Somewhere down the street, a rooster refuses to respect your need for sleep. You roll over, or try to, but the straw mattress and rough wool blanket remind you that this isn't your century anymore. You're in ancient Rome, and today, it's time to pick a spouse. Well, not you exactly. You don't really get a vote. Here, marriage isn't a personal milestone, it's a family merger, part of the lifelong chess game played by Roman households. Fathers and mothers meet in smoky atriums, talking dowries, connections, and property rights. If you're lucky, someone remembers to ask whether the bride and groom have actually met before the ceremony. If not, well, surprise. For the wealthy, marriage is a power tool. A senator might offer his daughter to another noble family in exchange for political backing. A general might marry into wealth to fund his next campaign. The dowry, often land, gold, or slaves, acts as both incentive and insurance. If the marriage fails, some or all of it returns to the bride's family. Nothing says romance quite like a clause about asset recovery. You stand quietly in the corner of a villa where one such deal unfolds. A young woman, maybe 15, sits beside her mother, hands folded, eyes downcast. Across from her, the potential groom's father is all smiles, as if sealing a pact with Jupiter himself. The groom, awkward and sweaty, keeps stealing glances at his future wife. She doesn't look back. Her opinion isn't the point here. For elite Romans, daughters are investments, ways to build alliances, expand influence, and secure future heirs. Sons, meanwhile, carry the family name and are expected to marry well enough to sustain it. Marriage is the social glue of the empire, but it's also the pressure cooker that keeps class lines firm. Still, not every match follows this rigid formula. Historians still argue whether middle and lower-class Romans had more freedom to choose their partners. Some evidence, graffiti, letters, and casual inscriptions, suggests that many ordinary Romans did marry for affection. A baker might wed a fellow merchant's daughter, or a soldier might return from campaign and marry a local woman he met along the frontier. It wasn't all politics and parchment. Sometimes, it was just two people trying to afford bread and happiness. You walk through the bustling forum, where matrons haggle over spices and young men strut by, pretending not to care who's watching. Somewhere nearby, a mother sizes up a potential suitor, muttering about his posture and the quality of his sandals. You can almost hear her internal monologue. If he can't afford decent leather, how will he support grandchildren? The process of finding a match, sponsalia, could feel surprisingly modern. Engagements were formal arrangements, witnessed and often sealed with a symbolic gift, like an iron ring worn on the third finger of the left hand. The Romans believed a vein ran from that finger straight to the heart, a lovely myth that survives today. Of course, in Rome, the ring was also a legal signal. We're negotiating, don't make other offers. Once an engagement was made, families exchanged documents outlining expectations, dowry size, inheritance rights, even behavioral clauses. If one party backed out without a good reason, social scandal followed faster than a chariot in rush hour. A jilted engagement could ruin reputations. People might whisper that the girl was difficult, or that the groom's family had gone bankrupt. Either way, someone's dinner invitations would dry up for a while. In the poorer neighborhoods, arrangements were simpler. A couple might announce their intent to marry to friends, or simply start living together. There's a beautiful simplicity in that. No paperwork, no politics, just mutual consent and a few neighbors who promise to remember it happened. But even in those humbler homes, love had limits. Roman society expected men to marry within their class, and women had to preserve family honor. A marriage between a freeborn woman and a slave was forbidden, though a freed slave, once legally emancipated, could marry. The law kept social hierarchies locked in place, as if Cupid had to fill out tax forms before shooting his arrows. You slip into a small courtyard where two young lovers whisper behind a fig tree, their laughter muffled. Maybe they're negotiating a future their parents don't approve of. You imagine the tension, duty on one side, desire on the other. The Romans had a word for that pull between heart and obligation. Pietas, a blend of loyalty, devotion, and responsibility. To defy it was to risk everything: status, inheritance, even family affection. There's a fringe story whispered among scholars about women secretly marrying below their rank and pretending their husbands were mere servants. When discovered, those unions were annulled and the women disgraced. Still, such tales linger in the cracks of history, proof that not every Roman accepted their fate quietly. By late afternoon, you find yourself outside the temple of Juno, where a line of hopeful couples waits to offer coins and prayers. A priest sprinkles incense onto coals, smoke curling upward like a silent plea. One girl asks softly if her future husband will be kind. The priest shrugs, probably not the reassurance she wanted. The gods favor endurance, he says. Translation: good luck. The Roman philosopher Musonius Rufus, sort of a stoic relationship coach, insisted that marriage was a partnership of equals in virtue, if not in power. He claimed that husbands and wives should support each other's moral growth. It sounds sweet, though you suspect his wife rolled her eyes a lot. As the sun dips behind tiled roofs, you realize how transactional and yet strangely human all this is. Arranged or chosen, these marriages still pulse with hope. Every couple wants what people always want: stability, affection, maybe someone who won't complain about the smell of olive oil soap. Before you leave, an older woman, probably a matchmaker, catches your eye. She winks and says, "In Rome, marriages are made between families, but love sneaks in afterward." Then she vanishes into the crowd, leaving behind the faint scent of myrrh and a lifetime of gossip. You step away from the forum, down a narrow street where laundry flaps in the evening breeze. The sound of chatter fades, replaced by the soft hum of daily life, the heartbeat of a city that built empires out of alliances and promises. And you, walking alone beneath the glow of oil lamps, can almost feel how heavy a simple word like forever must have been back then. The next morning smells faintly of olive oil and fresh bread, the kind of scent that almost makes you forget how political love is here. You follow the noise of street vendors and end up near a jeweler's stall glittering with copper and iron rings. They aren't shiny enough to scream luxury, but in Rome, they carry something far more valuable than sparkle: promise. You watch a young man nervously pace near the stall, clutching a small pouch. His tunic's a little wrinkled, his sandals dusty from running errands. Across from him stands a girl, barely out of her teens, pretending to examine trinkets while her mother keeps an eagle eye on everything, including the size of the ring he's about to offer. When he finally steps forward, he stumbles through the words every Roman fiancé knows: "Spondus mihi?" "Do you promise yourself to me?" She answers softly, "Spondio. I promise." And just like that, two families are now legally entangled. You'd think engagements were romantic here, but really, they're contracts with jewelry. The Romans treated betrothals, sponsalia, as formal commitments, often arranged years before the couple could even marry. For the elite, these engagements could happen when the bride was as young as 7, though marriage would wait until puberty. Imagine being engaged before you lose your baby teeth. You can almost hear modern sensibilities screaming from across the centuries. Still, the engagement wasn't eternal. Either family could break it off, though not without scandal. If the man backed out, he was expected to return any gifts and might even pay damages. If the woman's family canceled, they kept the presents as consolation. Gossip, of course, was the real punishment. A cancelled sponsalia spread through Roman dinner parties faster than cheap wine. You look down at the ring in the young man's hand. It's not gold but iron, symbolizing strength and permanence. Iron rusts, sure, but the Romans loved metaphors more than metallurgy. Some richer couples did use gold rings, though tradition frowned on it for daytime wear. Too flashy, they said. Romans preferred their sentiment with a side of restraint. There's an old joke scratched into the wall of a tavern in Pompeii: he promised her iron and gave her lies. You can't help but grin. Apparently, romantic disappointment hasn't evolved much in 2 millennia. Once the engagement was sealed, a small feast often followed. Family, friends, maybe a hired flutist playing something cheerful enough to disguise the tension. The couple might exchange kisses, though in polite society, public affection was frowned upon. A Roman kiss wasn't about sparks, it was a social handshake with lips. You trail the couple as they head toward the woman's house, where her father prepares a short ceremony at the family shrine. He lights a small oil lamp to Juno, protector of women and marriage, while the mother ties a thin woolen thread around the girl's wrist, a symbol of chastity and unity. It's touching, even beautiful, until you remember it's also a public announcement that her body, her wealth, and her destiny now belong to another family. Historians still argue whether young Roman women saw this as oppression or simply normal life. Surviving letters show hints of both: affection for husbands chosen by parents, and resentment from those forced into political unions. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the dusty middle. You peek inside the atrium, where the engaged couple now sit apart, supervised by a matron who looks like she's trained to detect flirting by sound alone. Gifts are exchanged: perfume, fabric, a small ivory comb. The girl's mother hands the groom-to-be a jar of honey, wishing sweetness upon their marriage. You half expect her to add, "You'll need it." Later, when the guests leave, the bride-to-be sits near the window, staring at the street. Rome hums outside, vendors shouting, children laughing, carts rumbling, but her world has already shifted. Her future is now mapped by ink, wax seals, and family honor. She fingers the iron ring, maybe wondering if the man she just promised herself to will be kind or cruel. Maybe both. You wander back into the city, where love and legality intertwine like ivy on marble. A scribe sits at a wooden stall writing betrothal contracts, charging by the line. You read over his shoulder clauses about dowry repayment, conditions for divorce, inheritance of potential children. Everything accounted for, except happiness. And yet, it would be unfair to call Roman engagement entirely loveless. The poet Catullus once wrote about giving his lover Lesbia not riches, but 1,000 kisses that no one can count. Passion existed, just outside the law's reach. Maybe that's why love poetry flourished here, because the real world left so little room for it. As you walk, an older woman stops you. She's missing a few teeth, her hair dyed with henna, and her voice raspy from too much amphora wine. "You're looking for a wife?" she asks, smirking. You laugh awkwardly. "I'm just observing." She nods knowingly. Everyone says that until they see a good dowry. Then she cackles and disappears into the crowd, leaving you to wonder if she's joking or just painfully correct. The engagement period could last months or years, and while gifts and visits continued, physical intimacy was forbidden. A Roman girl's reputation was the foundation of her family's respectability. If she was rumored to be impure before marriage, her family's social standing could collapse overnight. Rome didn't forgive scandal easily. Well, unless you were an emperor. Then you could do anything short of setting the forum on fire. And, well, even that happened once. Some fringe customs show how deeply superstition ran. Brides avoided stepping on thresholds, bad luck, supposedly, because the goddess of the hearth might take offense. Others avoided certain days for engagement ceremonies, especially the calends, nones, and ides of each month, which were considered ominous. Romans loved scheduling their lives around fear of divine side-eye. By sunset, the streets are cooling, and you can smell dinner: garum sauce, roasted lentils, a whiff of vinegar. The young couple from earlier sit together under a portico, sharing their first relaxed conversation now that the paperwork's done. They talk quietly about their favorite foods, the market, their family's endless expectations. It's small talk, but it feels almost sacred after all the ceremony. You find yourself smiling. For all the politics and power, engagements were still moments of fragile hope, when two people stared down the machinery of empire and whispered, "Maybe we can make this work." The ring glints faintly in the dusk, catching the last golden light of day. Somewhere, a poet writes another ode to Venus. Somewhere else, a scribe files another contract. Between them, Rome spins on, half heart and half law. You wake to the sound of 100 sandals scuffing against the street. The city hums louder than usual today. A wedding is happening nearby, and in Rome, that means half the neighborhood is suddenly an expert in fashion, fortune, and scandal. You slip through the crowd, following the smell of baking honeycakes and the chatter of women comparing hairstyles. It's the bride's big day, or, more accurately, her family's. She's been up since dawn, surrounded by attendants who braid her hair into 6 long strands called the sani crines, tied together with ribbons of wool. Each braid symbolizes her connection to Rome's past, echoes of the Vestal virgins who once tended the sacred fires. You watch as a friend tucks a tiny sprig of marjoram into her hair, for luck. Her dress is pure white wool, simple but heavy, fastened by a belt tied in the Hercules knot, supposedly the hardest knot to untie. You can probably guess who gets that honor later tonight. Over it all, she wears the flammeum, a bright orange-red veil that blazes like the evening sun. It's not just for show. The color represents warmth, fertility, and divine protection. Her mother adjusts the veil one last time, eyes glistening, whispering a prayer to Juno. The bride's hands tremble slightly. She's about to leave behind her family forever. A Roman woman never really came back home after her wedding. Her loyalty transferred completely to her husband's household. Even her household gods changed. You can feel the gravity of it hanging in the air. The groom, meanwhile, is outside pacing in his best toga, probably rented, judging by the fit. He's flanked by his father, who's pretending not to be nervous, and 2 friends who keep offering him wine under the guise of calming his spirit. They'll regret that later. At last, the moment comes. The pronuba, a married woman chosen for her good character, which is Roman for still married and not rumored to be scandalous, takes the bride's hand and leads her to the groom. There's a hush, and someone produces a tray with bread, salt, and wine. The couple join right hands, the ancient gesture of dextrarum iunctio, symbolizing unity and trust. They speak a simple vow, ubi tu Gaius, ego Gaia. Where you are Gaius, I am Gaia. It's short, almost whisper-soft, but you can feel its permanence ripple through the courtyard. A cheer erupts, followed by applause and a few jokes from the older men who've clearly had too much Falernian wine already. Somewhere in the back, a group of kids start clapping off-beat. A neighbor mutters that the bride's dowry must have cost a fortune. Weddings may be sacred, but gossip never takes a holiday. The ceremony ends with the sacrifice of a small animal, usually a pig, to the household gods. The air fills with incense and laughter. The priest blesses the union, invoking Juno, Venus, and the spirits of the ancestors. Everyone toasts to health, prosperity, and many children. One uncle yells, preferably sons, and gets smacked by his wife's fan. Then comes the feast. Tables overflow with cheese, olives, figs, honeyed almonds, roasted chicken, and, of course, wine. Always wine. Romans never let a milestone pass without trying to outdrink each other. The bride sits quietly beside her husband, picking at her food while guests make increasingly wild toasts. Someone attempts poetry. Someone else throws up discreetly behind a pillar. Typical wedding chaos, eternal across time. And there's music, pipes, lyres, and the rhythmic clapping of hands. The newlyweds don't dance, but their guests do, swaying awkwardly between laughter and intoxication. The groom's best friend leads a chant, mixing ancient blessings with rude jokes. It's strangely comforting, how much this feels like every wedding reception you've ever seen, minus the electric lights and awkward DJs. Later, as twilight falls, the deductio begins, the wedding procession. The bride is led, ceremoniously dragged, from her family home to her husband's. This is the emotional centerpiece of the whole affair, a reenactment of the mythical abduction of the Sabine women, a moment that, oddly enough, Romans considered romantic. Torches line the street. Guests shout blessings and hurl nuts into the air, a fertility symbol, because Rome never missed a chance for metaphor. The bride walks, or pretends to be pulled, while children sing ribald verses and old women toss flower petals. One man even carries a small spinning wheel and distaff, symbols of domestic virtue, because apparently the party needs props. At the threshold of her new home, she stops. She mustn't step on it. That would anger the spirits within. So the groom lifts her in his arms, carrying her over, though not always gracefully. The crowd cheers, someone whistles, and the couple disappears into the atrium as the doors close behind them. Inside, the bride greets the household gods and offers coins to the Lares, the ancestral spirits who guard the home. A servant brings her water and fire, signifying purity and shared life. Then, finally, she sits on a sheepskin, the symbol of fertility, while the household matron murmurs a prayer for strong sons. You notice that no one ever prays for daughters. As the night deepens, laughter echoes from the courtyard, the last of the guests stumbling home under flickering torchlight. The groom's friends linger outside, banging on the door and singing teasing songs, ancient Rome's version of post-wedding hazing. Inside, the new couple sits in nervous silence, surrounded by the smell of wax, wine, and smoke. You imagine the bride staring at the wall, veil still half covering her face, wondering what tomorrow will bring. Her world has changed completely in a single day. Her name, her home, her gods, even her status, all rewritten by ceremony. Historians still argue whether Roman weddings were moments of joy or merely duty, whether love grew later or was buried beneath politics. But here, in this small flickering room, it's hard not to believe in some quiet tenderness. The groom offers her a cup of wine, their hands brush, and for the first time that day, she smiles. Outside, the last torch sputters out. Somewhere in the city, another feast begins, another deal is struck, another bride ties the same knot. The empire turns, indifferent yet eternal, built on these unions that bind not just hearts, but history itself. And as you step out into the cooling Roman night, you can still hear faint laughter, human, imperfect, and enduring. The next morning smells like smoke, bread, and the faint trace of last night's spilled wine. You wake to the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere beyond the courtyard, and the muffled chatter of servants preparing for the day. The new bride, still veiled in orange silk, sits upright on a low stool, blinking into her first sunrise as a Roman wife. You follow her through her prima main, her first morning in a house that's no longer her own. She moves quietly, the way someone does when they're not sure of the rules yet. A servant helps her wash her hands and face with rose-scented water, then hands her a small bronze mirror. The reflection stares back nervously. Around her neck gleams a small amulet, the bulla, which she'll soon exchange for a married woman's veil. Childhood officially ends here. Down the hall, the husband is already awake. Well, awake enough to discuss household finances with the steward while pretending not to yawn. His voice carries the tone of ownership. This is, after all, his domain now. The domus isn't just a house, it's a miniature empire. Every column, every mosaic tile, every bowl of olives says something about his status. The bride joins him for breakfast, honeyed bread, dates, and watered wine. It's their first meal together as husband and wife, but conversation stays formal. He asks polite questions about her sleep, her family's journey home, while she answers with the precise balance of modesty and wit her mother trained her for. You can tell she's still measuring every word, like each one might tilt her future one way or another. After breakfast, the pranuba, the same matron who joined their hands yesterday, guides the bride toward the household shrine. Together, they kneel before the laras and penates, the guardian spirits of home and pantry. The smell of burning incense thickens as the bride places a small cake on the altar and whispers a prayer. For peace, for harmony, for sons who'll make their ancestors proud. The matron nods approvingly, whispering, "Now the house accepts you." You glance around the atrium. Everything here feels like a living organism. Marble floors polished to reflection, wax tablets stacked neatly on the writing desk, and the faint drip of the impluvium fountain echoing against painted walls. The bride's steps sound almost too loud in this space. By midday, she's introduced to everyone she's now responsible for: slaves, servants, and family dependents. There's the cook, who grumbles about the new grain prices, the nurse who once cared for the husband himself, the steward who controls the household budget, and a handful of young servants who avert their eyes out of habit. She greets them with a shy nod. Some smile back, others don't. She's not just another mistress, they've seen many, but the new ruler of this domestic microcosm. For Roman women of status, household management was no small feat. She'll oversee everything from food storage to linen production, from tutoring children to managing slaves. It's empire building on a smaller scale, powered by intellect, patience, and the occasional strategic glare. Historians still argue whether Roman wives truly wielded influence or simply appeared to. Officially, the husband, the paterfamilias, held all legal power. He could annul decisions, reclaim property, even dissolve the marriage. Yet letters and inscriptions suggest many women subtly ruled behind the scenes, steering households, arranging marriages for relatives, and negotiating favors through social networks. One could say the empire was half built on whispered advice at breakfast. Back in the house, the bride receives her first symbolic task: weaving. A servant brings her wool and a spindle, and she begins to spin thread, the ancient mark of feminine virtue. Roman moralists loved this image: the noble wife spinning wool, her hands busy, her heart pure. You can practically hear the poets sighing. Of course, the less poetic truth is that upper-class women rarely did much actual weaving. They had staff for that. Still, the gesture mattered. It told the household, and the gods, that she intended to embody the ideals of pudicitia, modesty, and industria, diligence. The afternoon sun slants across the courtyard as the couple walks through the villa together. He points out the family archives, the guest rooms, the garden where figs are ripening. When they reach the slaves' quarters, she hesitates. The air is thick with heat and quiet resignation. The husband brushes past it with a casual, "They're well fed." You sense she doesn't entirely believe him. Later, while he meets with clients in the atrium, petitioners, freedmen, and business partners, the new wife withdraws to the women's quarters, the gymnasium. Here, the world feels softer. Weaving looms hum, children giggle, and the scent of lavender oil hangs heavy. She sits with the older women, learning the rhythms of her new life. When to light the lamps, how to direct the slaves, which guests to flatter, which to ignore. Every movement is choreography learned over generations. A servant pours her diluted wine. She takes a sip and glances at the window, at the sliver of blue sky beyond the courtyard. She probably won't see much of the city from here anymore. Roman matrons rarely wandered beyond their homes without good reason. Freedom, for her, now means stability. Outside, the the husband's laughter echoes. You catch fragments of conversation, property, politics, the upcoming games. His life, you realize, will still stretch far beyond these walls. The forum, the baths, the Senate. Hers will orbit this house, unseen but essential. You can almost hear the unspoken understanding forming between them. He controls the public world, she governs the private one. Together, they uphold the delicate illusion that Rome itself is perfectly balanced. As dusk settles, servants light oil lamps shaped like dolphins. Shadows stretch long across the mosaic floors. The bride returns to the household shrine, adding fresh olive branches to the altar. For a moment, the house is silent but for the soft hiss of the lamps. She closes her eyes, breathing in the smoke, whispering one last prayer. Not to Juno or Venus, but perhaps to anyone who might listen. Let me belong here. Outside, the streets hum again with evening life. Vendors closing stalls, lovers whispering by fountains, and children chasing one another through the dust. The bride sits alone, still dressed in her wedding veil, feeling the weight of centuries of expectation pressing gently on her shoulders. You watch her light one final taper before bed, the flame flickering uncertainly against the painted gods on the wall. The night air drifts through the open courtyard, warm and faintly sweet. Somewhere beyond the domus walls, Rome exhales, vast, noisy, indifferent. But inside, in this small world of flickering lamps and whispered vows, a new life begins its quiet rhythm. Morning again, and Rome wakes with the steady rumble of wagons over stone. Somewhere nearby, a market erupts with a chorus of vendors yelling about fish, figs, and fresh bread. You step into the soft sunlight filtering through the peristyle garden, watching the new couple navigate their first full day of married life together. He's reading tablets, letters from clients, reports from estates, perhaps a reminder that someone owes him 20 denarii. She's at the table across from him, spinning wool between glances at her new husband. There's no rush, no laughter yet, but a rhythm begins to take shape. Breakfast, prayer, duties, silence. This is what Roman love looks like most days. Quiet partnership, not fireworks. The philosophers will later call it concordia, the harmony of souls through shared duty. The poets, of course, mock that idea entirely. They want passion, affairs, and heartbreak. You get the sense the truth sat somewhere between the two, where affection had to share a bed with obligation. As the hours slide by, the house settles into its daily routine. Servants sweep the mosaic floors. The smell of olive oil and rosemary drifts from the kitchen. A neighbor stops by to deliver congratulations, and, naturally, to inspect the bride's jewelry under the guise of politeness. After the visitor leaves, the couple strolls through the colonnade. He speaks about his father's vineyard near Tiber, about politics, about the upcoming games. She listens, nodding politely, adding small comments where she can. He seems surprised when she asks a clever question about trade tariffs. It's the first time she's seen him genuinely smile. For all their legal inequality, Roman marriages often contained these quiet, delicate negotiations, moments where respect was tested and, sometimes, earned. Historians still argue whether these marriages were affectionate or purely functional. Letters from couples like Pliny the Younger and his wife Calpurnia suggest there was tenderness, even love, especially among educated elites. Pliny once wrote that he missed her when she was away and reread her letters, as if I were holding her hand. You can't fake that level of sincerity, even for an audience of history nerds. Still, for many women, love had to bloom in captivity. A Roman matron's freedom was limited. She couldn't vote, hold office, or freely travel without permission. Yet she could own property, manage estates, and, in certain cases, even lend money. Influence wore a quiet face here. The husband, meanwhile, was expected to maintain dignity, provide financially, and, most importantly, produce heirs. That last part hung over every marriage like a divine command. Without children, a union was considered incomplete. In some cases, even suspicious. You watch as the wife is guided to the cubicula, the private rooms, where she helps the nurse feed the children of slaves and freed women. It's a strange rehearsal for motherhood, tender yet distant. She seems to warm to the task, smiling when a baby grabs her finger. Maybe she's imagining her future sons, their tiny voices echoing in this same atrium. By midday, she retreats to the shade of the garden, weaving beside the fountain. The sound of trickling water fills the air, mingling with the faint hum of the city beyond the walls. You realize that this domestic calm isn't passive, it's performance. Every movement, every silence reinforces her virtue. Romans adored pudicitia, modesty, as the ultimate female virtue. A wife's reputation wasn't just personal, it reflected her husband's moral standing. Somewhere in the distance, a poet named Juvenal is sharpening his quill, ready to mock unruly women who dare to speak too freely. He'll write about wives who gossip at the baths, poison their husbands, or debate philosophy in public. He'll call it satire, she'll call it Tuesday. A fringe belief circulates among servants that newly married couples must sleep with an iron amulet under the bed to ward off envious spirits. The bride laughs it off when told, but you notice she slips one beneath the pillow that night anyway. Tradition has a way of winning these arguments. In the evening, the couple hosts a small dinner. Family, neighbors, and a philosopher friend who speaks entirely in moral metaphors. The wife supervises the kitchen, instructing servants on the seasoning of lentils and the arrangement of platters. The husband greets guests at the door, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder when he introduces her. It's a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but you can sense the social choreography. He, the public face; she, the silent affirmation of his respectability. Dinner begins with toasts to the gods and awkward laughter. Someone jokes that marriage is like a pair of oxen tied to the same yoke, one always pulling harder. The bride's mother-in-law chuckles knowingly, the groom pretends not to hear. You sip imaginary wine and wonder if ancient humor aged any better than the garum sauce smells. It didn't. Then, something tender happens. As the guests talk politics, the wife reaches for a fallen napkin, and her husband quietly picks it up first. Their eyes meet, just briefly. He smiles, a soft, tired smile, and she returns it. For a heartbeat, the noise fades, and you glimpse something rare in this world: affection, unspoken but unmistakable. Later, after the guests leave, the couple walks under the open roof of the atrium, listening to the fountain's rhythmic splash. The night feels lighter, the air cooler. He tells her about his plans to expand the vineyard. She listens, then suggests a better trade route along the Tiber. He pauses, considering it seriously. You can tell, respect has taken root. Love, in Rome, was never an explosion. It was a negotiation, slow, deliberate, sometimes disguised as duty. But here, among flickering lamps and drifting incense, you realize that affection could survive even inside walls built of expectation. Before they retire, the wife extinguishes the household lamps one by one, whispering thanks to the gods. In the final glow, she glances once more at her husband across the room. He nods, almost shyly. The distance between them shrinks, just a little. Outside, the moon hangs over the tiled roofs like a quiet witness. Somewhere in another villa, Another couple argues. Somewhere else, one laughs. The empire is vast, but every home tells the same story. Two people, learning the rhythm of life together, between law and longing. You walk away through the cooling night, the sound of the fountain fading behind you. Rome sleeps restlessly, dreaming of empire. But in this small house, a husband and wife are just beginning to dream of each other. The next morning unfolds differently, and you can feel it before you even open your eyes. The air smells heavier, coal smoke from distant forges, fried onions from the market below, and that faint tang of humanity that clings to crowded tenements. You're no longer in a marble villa but deep in the Suburra, the noisy heart of working-class Rome. Here, the streets are narrower, the walls closer, and the rhythm of marriage changes completely. The wealthy may marry for politics and lineage, but the average Roman marries for survival. You walk past rows of insulated, tall, creaking apartment blocks that seem to lean on one another for balance. Laundry flaps between windows. A woman leans out of one, yelling for her husband to bring home bread instead of wine. Somewhere above, a child drops a clay cup that explodes near your feet. Domestic bliss, Suburra style. Inside a cramped room on the second floor, a couple wakes on a straw mattress barely wide enough for two. He's a leatherworker, hands already stained from dye. She sells vegetables in the Forum Boreum. Their marriage wasn't arranged by families or sealed with priests and dowries. It simply began when they moved in together, and stayed that way long enough for everyone to nod and say, "They're married now." In legal terms, it's iusis, the simplest form of marriage in Rome. No dowry, no ceremony, no witnesses. Just shared bread, shared rent, and shared gossip. After a year of living together, the union becomes recognized by custom. Unless, of course, the woman spends 3 consecutive nights away. That little loophole allows her to avoid falling fully under her husband's authority. Imagine timing your spa weekends to preserve your independence. It's oddly empowering. You step closer and watch the morning routine unfold. She kneads dough on the table while he sharpens a blade for his trade. They bicker about money, laugh about the landlord, and share the last piece of cheese without arguing. It's simple, chaotic, and real. This is marriage without witnesses or wealth. It's love built on daily endurance rather than divine blessing. The philosophers ignore it, the poets rarely sing of it, but this is the pulse of the empire. By mid-morning, the woman carries her basket of vegetables to the market. You follow her past beggars and soldiers, through the smell of dust and cumin. She pauses to chat with a friend, another wife whose husband's been at sea for months. "If he comes back rich, I'll forgive him everything," she jokes. They both laugh, knowing the odds. Back in the richer district, the contrast is blinding. Marble villas, private baths, and manicured gardens where noblewomen glide like swans. Their marriages are contracts wrapped in silk. Theirs have dowries, slaves, and names recorded in family archives. But even here, the air hums with the same tension: duty versus desire, control versus compromise. A patrician wife reclines on a couch, reading poetry while her husband dictates letters to a secretary. She looks serene, but her life is just as confined, her every move watched, her every friendship analyzed. If she visits the baths too often or receives too many letters, whispers start. Reputation here is currency, and she guards hers with the precision of a general defending a fortress. Meanwhile, down in the Suburra, the vegetable seller's husband finishes his workday and stops at a tavern. Inside, men joke about their wives and complain about prices. Someone quotes a bit of Horace, mangling the Latin, but everyone laughs anyway. They speak of their marriages not as burdens but as shared battles against life's absurdity. One man brags that his wife can outdrink him. Another swears his can out-yell him. There's pride in it, strange, affectionate pride. You realize that love here survives not through ceremony but through resilience. Historians still argue whether lower-class marriages were happier than elite ones. The evidence is scattered: graffiti, epitaphs, and household records. But some tomb inscriptions written by ordinary Romans read like quiet love letters. One says, "To my wife, who never quarreled with me." Another, "She was my delight, even when the bread was hard." Maybe happiness, like empire, depends more on endurance than perfection. You wander toward the docks, where soldiers and sailors marry local women before shipping out. The unions are half legal, half practical. Some men promise to return. Some actually do. Others leave behind small coins or carved tokens as symbols of fidelity, ancient long-distance relationships carried by rumor and prayer. Further along, in the shadow of a temple, a group of freed women gathers. They're former slaves who earned or bought their freedom and now run modest shops. Many are married to freedmen like themselves. Roman law allows it, and among them, equality feels slightly more tangible. These marriages aren't glamorous, but they're built on shared survival. One woman shows you her wedding ring, thinner than a vine stem. She smiles. "We had nothing when we started," she says, "but he never lied, and I never stopped talking." You both laugh. It's not poetry, but it's honest. At dusk, the city glows bronze in the fading light. In every district, every class, the same domestic rhythms unfold, some in silk, some in rags, all human. The patrician wife lights a lamp near her statue of Juno. The vegetable seller blows on the coals to warm a stew. Both whisper prayers into the smoky air. Different words, same hope. Later, you pass the Subura again. The couple from the insula sit by their window, eating from one bowl. A neighbor's baby cries, dogs bark, someone upstairs sings off-key. The wife rests her head on her husband's shoulder for a moment before swatting him for stealing too much bread. It's imperfect, loud, full of life, and somehow more beautiful than any marble ceremony. Across town, the noblewoman extinguishes her lamp, lying beside a man who talks of politics even in his sleep. She stares at the ceiling, wondering whether her husband's loyalty matches his ambition. The silk sheets feel cool but lonely. Two women, two worlds. Both Roman wives, both carrying the same invisible weight of expectation. One bears it with quiet grace, the other with laughter and garlic breath. And you, standing between them, finally see the truth. Marriage in Rome was never one story but millions, some gilded, some grimy, all tangled together in the heartbeat of a city that never truly slept. A donkey brays in the alley. Somewhere, a poet starts another verse about love and loss. You smile. If only he'd seen this, he'd have written something better. The noise of Rome fades as you move uphill toward the Palatine, where marble villas gleam under the morning sun. This is where the empire's power couples live, the men who rule the world, and the women who rule them. Marriages here don't just shape families, they shape history itself. You pause outside a villa's gates. Guards in polished armor stand like statues. Inside, laughter and music drift through open windows. Today, an aristocratic couple hosts a banquet, not for love, but for strategy. Half the Senate will attend. You can feel it already. Every toast will be a political move, every smile a negotiation. You slip inside just as servants adjust garlands of laurel and rose. The wife, Cornelia, draped in silk dyed deep crimson, moves through the room like a trained diplomat. Her husband, Marcus, a rising senator, greets guests near the door. They exchange a nod, not affectionate, but practiced. They're not a couple so much as a coalition. The dining couches fill with senators, generals, and a few poets pretending to look relevant. Silver platters shine beneath oil lamps. Conversation begins with politics, shifts to gossip, and inevitably lands on marriages, because in Rome, love and power are inseparable currencies. Cornelia laughs at a joke she's heard a dozen times. She knows her presence is part of Marcus's reputation. A well-behaved, admired wife signals virtue, and virtue wins votes. You wonder whether she's happy. She doesn't look unhappy, just rehearsed. Historians still argue whether elite Roman women enjoyed genuine influence or merely the illusion of it. On paper, their lives were tightly controlled. But look closer, and you find them everywhere. In letters, in scandals, in whispered rumors that terrified emperors. Behind nearly every major man stood a woman pulling strings, or cutting them. Take Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus. She was the quiet architect of Rome's first imperial dynasty. While her husband rebuilt the republic's facade, she quietly built a bloodline. Some accused her of poisoning rivals, others of manipulating her sons. Whatever the truth, one thing's certain: Livia understood that in a world where women had no official power, influence was the sharper weapon. You imagine her walking these same halls centuries earlier, serene, calculating, untouchable. Poets praised her modesty, but everyone knew better. She embodied Rome's paradox, the wife as both ornament and operator. At the banquet, a senator leans too close to Cornelia, murmuring compliments that sound more like offers. Her eyes flick to Marcus across the room. He's laughing with another woman, pretending not to notice. You can almost hear the invisible negotiations at play, each testing how far they can stretch the boundaries of decorum without snapping them entirely. Infidelity, in this world, is as common as imported wine. A husband's affairs are tolerated, a wife's can destroy her. Yet power bends morality. Some imperial wives, Messalina, Poppaea, Agrippina, ignored the double standard entirely, using scandal as leverage. Romans gossiped about them endlessly, but fear always edged their mockery. You drift toward a quieter corner where two matrons whisper behind fans. "Did you hear about Julia, the emperor's daughter?" one asks. The other raises her eyebrows dramatically. 3 lovers in one night, and still she writes poetry about virtue. They laugh into their wine. You'd call it cattiness, but here, gossip is survival. Cornelia joins them, smiling faintly. "Better to have 3 lovers," she says dryly, "than 3 senators thinking they own you." The laughter that follows isn't just amusement, it's respect. For a moment, you glimpse her real self beneath the painted calm. Later that night, when the guests have gone and the slaves clear away the silver, Marcus and Cornelia finally speak alone. He praises her grace before pivoting to politics. "Lucius wants to ally through marriage," he says. "His niece is of age." She raises an eyebrow. "You mean for our son?" He nods. "A good match. Her family controls grain shipments." She sighs. "Then I'll visit tomorrow." And just like that, a future alliance is born, not from love, but from logistics. The Romans would call it prudentia, foresight. You might call it emotional chess. Outside the window, Rome glows gold in the distance. Torches flicker, and the sound of distant revelry floats up from the lower hills. You think of the Subura couple from earlier, the vegetable seller and the leatherworker, and wonder what they'd make of this marble world where affection is a tool and loyalty is a transaction. Marcus walks toward his study, leaving Cornelia alone. She removes her jewelry, one piece at a time, her reflection shimmering in polished bronze. For a moment, she looks softer, almost wistful. You imagine her younger, before politics, before strategy, dreaming of a husband who would love her, not just need her. She glances toward the doorway, where the faint sound of Marcus's voice echoes as he dictates another letter. Her lips curve into a tired smile. "Duty before desire," she murmurs, repeating the Roman mantra that keeps so many marriages alive. Still, you can sense something unspoken beneath her calm. Ambition, frustration, maybe even pride. She knows her place in history will never bear her name, but her fingerprints will be all over it. There's a strange beauty in it, you think. A kind of love that isn't romantic but strategic, the partnership of two people bound by the same hunger for survival. Rome didn't build itself on affection, it built itself on alliances like this. By midnight, the house is silent except for the trickle of the courtyard fountain. The moonlight glints off silver cups and half-empty wine bowls. You step outside, feeling the chill against your skin. From up here, the whole city seems to glitter. Domes, statues, temples, all powered by marriages like theirs. Power couples, indeed. Their love isn't measured in kisses but in influence, whispered plans, and unspoken debts. And somehow, that makes it both terrifying and magnificent. As you walk back down the hill, the laughter from the villa fades. You can't help but think, somewhere in those marble halls, between calculation and compromise, there must still be moments of tenderness. A shared look, a small touch, a spark that reminds them why the alliance matters. Maybe even the empire, for all its laws and armies, needed those small sparks to keep burning. The next day, Rome feels quieter, as if the city itself is catching its breath after all the politics and posturing. You find yourself walking along the shaded portico of the Basilica Julia, where women in fine stolas drift past like bright sails. They move with the slow confidence of those who understand both their limits and the power hidden inside them. Today, you're watching the Roman wife not as a bride or ornament, but as a citizen. Well, sort of. Officially, women in Rome weren't citizens in the full legal sense. They couldn't vote, hold office, or speak in the Senate. But, unofficially, they ran households, influenced politics through whisper and persuasion, and shaped the empire's moral backbone. The contradiction hums under everything, like the faint buzz of a distant lyre string. You pass a group of young women seated near the temple steps, sewing and gossiping under the watchful eye of an older matron. They laugh softly, talking about a local scandal. Apparently, a senator's wife has been caught attending philosophy lectures. A woman reading about stoicism. One giggles. What's next? Women voting? Another shushes her, glancing nervously at a passing guard. It's absurd, but it's real. For Roman men, the ideal woman was obedient, loyal, and invisible in public life. The philosopher Cato the Elder once said, "If you allow women equality, they will soon be your masters." You roll your eyes so hard you can almost hear them click. Yet, beneath all that patriarchal thunder, the reality is softer, more complex. Inside their homes, women wielded quiet but undeniable power. Wealthy wives controlled domestic finances, managed estates, and educated children. Many even ran businesses through male proxies, shops, farms, vineyards, all while pretending they didn't. In a shaded courtyard, You watch a woman named Emilia oversee her husband's accounts while he's away in the provinces. She wears no toga, only prostitutes and men wore those, but her stola and palla are impeccable. Around her, scribes copy figures, servants deliver reports, and her son practices rhetoric nearby. Every few minutes, she signs a wax tablet with a firm hand. Technically, she's not allowed to make business decisions. Practically, she's keeping the family afloat. Historians still argue whether Roman women saw themselves as oppressed or empowered by such contradictions. Letters and epitaphs hint at both pride and frustration. Some inscriptions proudly list women as domina, mistress of the household, while others simply record that they obeyed their husband's will. Two sides of the same empire, written in stone. And then, of course, there are the exceptions, women who simply refuse to fit the mold. Take Hortensia, the orator who, during the civil wars, marched into the Roman Forum and gave a fiery speech before the triumvirs themselves. Her argument: that women shouldn't be taxed for wars they didn't start or vote for. The men were stunned into silence. The crowd erupted in applause. The result: they repealed half the tax. One woman, one speech, half a victory. But in Rome, that was monumental. Back in the quiet villas, power often came more subtly. A wife could sway her husband's opinions over dinner, persuade him which client to favor, or even which law to support. Roman men might have written the decrees, but Roman women edited them between courses. You pause near a small shrine to Pudicitia, the goddess of modesty, where a few women pray. The marble statue glows pale in the afternoon light. A priestess murmurs blessings about chastity and obedience, but one of the younger women's lips twitch in irony. Modesty is the veil men wear over our ambition, she whispers to her friend. You stifle a laugh. The lower classes lived the same paradox in their own way. Freed women who had once been slaves could technically control their own property, but their former masters, now patrons, often kept a hand in their affairs. And yet, many of these women rose higher than anyone expected. Inscriptions tell of freed women who became merchants, bakers, even ship owners. One famous example, Iunctio of Pompeii, funded an entire public building in her city, dedicating it to concord and piety. Her statue still stands in the ruins, chin lifted toward eternity. As dusk begins to settle, you drift into a small dinner gathering at another villa. This one is hosted by a poet, whose wife, Claudia, is clearly the reason half the city's intellectuals showed up. She sits by the fountain, effortlessly commanding attention, her laughter bright enough to make even the philosophers blush. One guest compliments her wit. Her husband beams. A modest woman, he says proudly. Claudia smirks. Only when asleep. The table roars with laughter. In moments like these, you see how women bent the rules without breaking them, how charm, intelligence, and social grace became their weapons of choice. Rome might have been a man's world, but women learned how to make the map. Later, as the guests leave and the villa grows quiet, Claudia removes her jewelry, one clasp at a time. She tells her maid, "They call us the weaker sex, but they never notice how often they quote our words at dinner." Then she blows out the lamp. You wander back through the moonlit streets, past shuttered shops and flickering oil lamps. The city breathes around you, half shadow, half marble, all contradiction. Roman wives lived inside invisible boundaries, but they learned every inch of the terrain. They obeyed, but they also maneuvered. They submitted, but they remembered everything. You realize now that the Roman marriage contract wasn't a cage. It was a labyrinth, and women like Claudia, Emilia, and Livia learned to walk it with quiet, terrifying grace. And tomorrow, as the empire continues its endless march, those same women will wake early, spin wool, count coins, soothe egos, and shape the future, while pretending to be part of the furniture. You can't decide whether that's tragedy or genius. Maybe both. You wake to the sound of male voices echoing through the courtyard, loud, confident, unquestioned. The paterfamilias is holding court. His words carry the weight of law, even within these walls. You find him in the atrium, surrounded by clients waiting for orders and family members waiting for permission to speak. Here he is, the Roman father, the legal heart of the household, both respected and feared. His authority is absolute, granted by tradition and sanctified by law. He decides marriages, manages property, and even holds the right, at least in theory, to disown or punish his children. The state itself is built on this miniature version of control. Rome's Senate is just a city-wide household. Its men are all patres in togas. The young wife from earlier stands silently behind him, her hands folded. She doesn't interrupt, not that she could. Her husband's decisions ripple through her world without consultation. Still, you can see her mind working, eyes sharp as she memorizes every name and favor being traded. She knows that listening is a kind of power, too. The paterfamilias finishes his morning ritual, offering incense to the household gods, saluting the busts of his ancestors, and muttering short prayers to Jupiter. He represents a lineage that's meant to outlast him. You realize how much of Roman identity rests on this idea of continuity, the living serving as a bridge between the dead and the unborn. And marriage, in that system, isn't about happiness, it's about legacy. He dismisses his clients with a wave, and the atrium falls quiet. His wife enters now, carrying a small tablet. She's careful with her tone as she reminds him that the vineyard accounts need reviewing. He nods curtly. In another household, that might count as affection. The Romans took patriarchy literally. The father's legal control, his patria potestas, extended over every descendant and dependent in the household. He could approve marriages, annul them, even sell his children into temporary servitude. By modern standards, it sounds monstrous. By Roman standards, it was order. Historians still argue whether fathers often exercised those extreme rights or merely kept them as symbolic power. Most agree that by the imperial period, those harsher laws had softened. Fathers still ruled, but wives and adult sons negotiated behind the scenes more freely. The empire had learned that total control wasn't always efficient. You follow the old man into his study. Shelves of scrolls line the walls, contracts, wills, legal codes. He taps one with a knobby finger and sighs. "The Republic is dead," he mutters, "but at least I still rule my house." There's no bitterness, just weary pride. To him, the home is a microcosm of Rome itself, hierarchical, disciplined, and male. Meanwhile, his grandson chases a dog through the courtyard, laughing. The matron scolds softly, then catches herself and lowers her eyes when her husband glances over. The balance is delicate, discipline wrapped in deference. But when he leaves the room, her posture changes. She straightens, adjusts the boy's tunic, and whispers, "Go," before he sees the mess. Her tone is firm, maternal, commanding. The household breathes easier when he's not there. You realize that even within this rigid hierarchy, there's fluidity. The paterfamilias may rule on paper, but daily life depends on quieter authority. His wife's, the steward's, even the slave's understanding of what he doesn't need to know. Rome survives not just through domination, but through the thousands of small acts of interpretation beneath it. As afternoon settles, a neighbor visits. Another patriarch, this one red-faced and furious. His daughter has eloped with a gladiator, and he's seeking advice. "A disgrace," he shouts. "A man who fights beasts, not debates." The older father listens, nods gravely, and finally says, "Then make her invisible. That is the Roman way." You feel a chill. Disowning, in this context, means social death. No need for violence when silence suffices. The wife listens from behind a curtain. Later, she tells her maid quietly, "Poor girl. At least she chose for herself." There's pity in her voice, but also envy. As evening draws near, the paterfamilias holds a family meal, reclining on a couch while his relatives sit below. He speaks of duty, honor, and the gods' favor. His words sound carved from marble. Yet when the wine flows and his son tells a crude joke, he laughs, loud and genuine. The power softens for a moment, replaced by something almost tender. Rome's contradictions live in that laugh. The same man who can legally disinherit his child also teaches him how to pray, how to hold a sword, how to love the empire. To the Romans, authority and affection weren't opposites, they were different faces of the same virtue, gravitas. You wander outside, the night air cooler now. From one villa, you hear a father shouting at a servant. From another, a family singing after dinner. Power here is everywhere, but so is the hum of life working around it, through it, despite it. Near a small shrine, you find a stone inscription half buried in ivy. "To my father, stern in duty, gentle in heart." You can almost hear the son's voice behind those words. Grateful, perhaps surprised, maybe still a little afraid. As you make your way back through the lamplit streets, the shape of Roman marriage becomes clearer. The wife may be the heart of the home, but the husband, and the father, remains its spine. Together they hold up something larger than themselves, an empire obsessed with order. You picture the young wife from earlier watching her husband preside over clients and contracts, learning when to speak and when silence serves better. She's adapting, not submitting. That's how Roman women survived patriarchy, by outlasting it from within. Back in the villa, the lamps are dimming. The paterfamilias has retired to bed, his household finally exhaling. Tomorrow, he'll rise at dawn, repeat the rituals, and believe the gods smile upon him because his family obeys. And maybe, in a strange way, they do. After all, Rome itself obeys the same rhythm. The rule of one over many, the illusion of control over chaos. The empire and the household mirror each other, endlessly. You pause at the doorway, glancing back at the silent atrium. The ancestral masks stare down from their niches, wax faces of the long dead, watching their descendants live by the same rules. The flicker of the oil lamps makes them seem almost alive, nodding in approval. You whisper to them, half a joke, half a truth. "You Romans really loved your authority, didn't you?" They don't answer. They never do. But somehow, you feel them smiling. The next morning starts with silence, a silence so clean you almost believe the city has forgotten how to breathe. Then, somewhere down the street, a clay pot breaks, a baby wails, and a vendor begins shouting about olives. Rome lives again. You're walking through the forum when you overhear something that turns heads faster than a chariot crash, a divorce announcement. Divorce, in Rome, isn't scandalous. It's Tuesday. You follow the gossip to a nearby portico where a small crowd has gathered. Two families face one another, stern and composed. No lawyers, no judges, no grand speeches. just one man handing back a few coins and a set of keys. The wife stands beside her mother, veil drawn low, holding a letter that ends their marriage in a single phrase, tuas residential tibi habito. Take your things and go. That's it. No court, no ceremony, no need for public approval. Roman marriage, by its very nature, was a union of mutual consent. And so, when that consent ended, so did the marriage. Easy to enter, easy to leave. The empire's most enduring institution, undone with the flick of a stylus. You think about the irony, a civilization so obsessed with laws, yet marriage and divorce rely on the simplest one of all, choice. The crowd disperses quickly. No one's shocked. Divorce here carries less shame than incompatibility. The philosopher Seneca even argued that a wise man marries often. You're not sure if that was philosophy or self-justification. In elite circles, serial marriage is practically sport. A senator might change wives as often as he changes political alliances. The poet Martial once mocked a woman who'd had 10 husbands in 1 year, though, to be fair, the men probably deserved it. Still, behind the dry humor, there's pain. You pass the former couple's home later that evening. The servants are already packing her things, garments, jewelry, a few household items. Her dowry will return to her family, minus any losses. She pauses at the threshold, glancing at the household shrine she tended for years. One last time, she touches the statue of Juno with her fingertips before walking out into the night. Her husband watches from the atrium, face unreadable. Maybe guilt, maybe relief. Divorce doesn't always mean hatred here, it often just means exhaustion. Two people drifting apart under the weight of expectations too heavy to carry together. Historians still argue whether Rome's ease of divorce empowered women or trapped them in endless cycles of male control. The truth lies, as always, in contradictions. For some, it was freedom. For others, exile. You make your way through the subura, where the lower classes handle separation more informally. Couples simply stop living together. Neighbors whisper, shrug, and move on. One man jokes, she took the cat, so I kept the stool. Fair trade. You laugh, even as you notice the tired look in his eyes. A street poet nearby strums a lyre and sings about his lost lover, calling her faithless as a senator's promise. The crowd cheers, throwing him coins. Even heartbreak becomes entertainment here. By contrast, in the upper classes, divorce announcements make the gossip rounds faster than wildfire. Letters fly between villas, and within days, the story mutates. Who was unfaithful, who stole whose slaves, who cried, who didn't. Rome's social elite feast on reputation the way others feast on olives. You attend one such dinner that night, where whispers about a famous couple, let's call them Gaius and Livia, flutter like moths around the lamplight. He divorced her for barrenness, someone says. No, another interrupts, for insolence. She spoke in front of guests. The hostess leans in, eyes gleaming. I heard she corrected his Latin. Gasps all around. Apparently, that's the real sin. You sip your imaginary wine and wonder whether these people ever tire of each other's cruelty. Probably not. Still, there's something oddly progressive about it. In many ancient cultures, women couldn't initiate divorce at all, but Roman wives could. If she no longer gave her consent to the union, she could leave. Of course, she'd risk losing status and comfort, but legally, she had the right. That small freedom mattered. You wander to the Tiber later, where another couple argues in the twilight. Their voices are low, the words sharp. She says, "You love your politics more than me." He replies, "Rome comes first." She laughs bitterly. "Then Rome can keep you." He doesn't stop her when she walks away. You stand there a long while, watching her vanish into the crowd. Divorce doesn't just end a contract here, it rearranges entire networks. Families lose alliances, dowries shift hands, inheritances get rewritten. The empire runs on these personal upheavals like an endless bureaucratic machine. And yet, life goes on. The next day, you see the same husband offering incense to the gods, his expression calm. A friend asks if he misses her. He shrugs. "The gods give. The gods take. I keep the furniture." You can't tell if he's joking. In time, both will remarry. That's how Rome works, renewal through repetition. The laws encourage it, the gods expect it. After all, without new unions, there are no heirs, and without heirs, no Rome. One fringe custom fascinates you. After a divorce, some women bury their wedding veils in secret, symbolically laying their old selves to rest. Others donate them to temples, leaving the goddess to guard whatever pieces of hope remain. You imagine a quiet room full of discarded veils, each one carrying the ghost of a promise. As the night deepens, you return to the quiet streets. Through open windows, you catch glimpses of other marriages, some laughing, some fighting, some merely enduring. The city hums with all of them, the whole messy spectrum of love and duty. And you can't help but think, maybe Rome's real genius wasn't in its architecture or its legions, but in its acceptance of impermanence. To the Romans, everything, even marriage, was part of a cycle. Order, decay, renewal. Bonds formed and broken, again and again, feeding the great organism that was the empire. You stop beneath a flickering oil lamp. A stray cat winds around your feet, purring. Somewhere in the distance, a chorus of drunken men sings an old wedding song, its melody soft and slurred. You whisper the same vow they once did, "Where you are Gaius, I am Gaia," and realize that for all its fragility, that phrase still holds something sacred. Maybe not eternal love, but eternal effort. Because in Rome, even when love fails, life keeps marching forward, undaunted, unromantic, relentlessly human. Morning again, and the city sounds sharper now. Hammer strikes from workshops, vendors calling out, someone laughing too loudly for this early hour. You make your way through the bustling forum, where conversation drips with gossip. Every marble column hums with secrets, and nearly every one of them, somehow, leads back to the same topic: who's sleeping with whom? Infidelity in Rome is less a moral crisis than a civic pastime. Everyone condemns it, everyone participates. Even the poets can't shut up about it. You can almost hear Ovid grinning from 2,000 years away, whispering, "Just make sure you don't get caught." You follow the sound of chatter to a shaded portico where a group of women fans themselves, pretending to discuss fashion while actually dissecting the latest scandal. A senator's wife has been caught sneaking out disguised as a slave to meet her lover in the baths. "She wore a wig," one woman hisses. "And his wife's perfume." The others gasp, half in shock, half in admiration. Rome runs on double standards, and adultery is Exhibit A. A man can have mistresses, courtesans, or even occasional dalliances with slaves. No one blinks. A woman, however, risks exile or worse. Adultery isn't just a sin, it's a legal offense. Augustus himself passed the Lex Julia de Adulteriis Coercendis, the law against adultery, turning what had been a private shame into a public crime. You pause by a wall where an old poster peels under the sun, Virtue is the fortress of marriage. Someone's added graffiti underneath. Tell that to Augustus. You laugh quietly. The emperor had famously exiled his own daughter Julia for her scandalous affairs, even as the city whispered about his own. Hypocrisy, the true Roman export. Inside a nearby tavern, men debate the same story from their side. If women were meant to be faithful, one says, Venus wouldn't have invented the night. Laughter erupts. Someone else adds, if wives don't stray, how do poets eat? It's meant as humor, but you catch the bitterness beneath it. Every joke, a confession in disguise. Adultery is everywhere. In poems, in court cases, in rumor. One famous trial still circulates through the gossip mill. A nobleman caught his wife with another man and dragged them both before the magistrate. When asked why he didn't simply forgive her, he replied, because I'm not Augustus, and she's not worth an empire. Brutal. But applause followed. You wander to the baths, Rome's favorite social hub. Here, flirtation thrives under steam. Men and women mingle in adjoining rooms, exchanging glances through the mist. The rules say they shouldn't, but rules dissolve in heat. A senator's wife adjusts her jewelry while pretending not to notice the young poet watching her. You can almost hear the opening line of his next elegy forming. She entered like Venus, and I forgot my toga. Historians still argue whether Roman society was truly permissive or just hypocritically indulgent. The evidence swings both ways. Moralists like Seneca thundered about purity, while poets like Ovid openly published manuals on seduction. Maybe that contradiction was the point. Rome always balanced virtue and vice like two sides of a coin. In the poorer districts, fidelity looks different. You visit a small tenement where a baker's wife scolds her husband for smiling too long at a customer. He swears it was nothing. She throws a crust of bread at his head. 10 minutes later, they're laughing again. Here, love's not about reputation, it's about staying alive together. Cheating isn't romanticized, it's just stupid. Still, human hearts don't obey class any better than law. You overhear a young freedwoman whisper to her neighbor, "He promised me freedom, then married another." Her voice breaks. You think of how many women like her have been footnotes in someone else's story. Unnamed, unremembered, but just as real. There's a darker side to all this, too. For elite women, even rumors of infidelity could ruin them. Husbands could divorce, reclaim dowries, or banish them to remote islands. A few unlucky ones, like the emperor's daughter Julia, found themselves exiled to rocky coastlines, their luxury replaced by loneliness. The irony? Most were punished not for cheating, but for embarrassing powerful men. By noon, the forum is buzzing again, filled with whispers that blur fact and fiction. You overhear a young clerk bragging that his patron's wife once smiled at him. "It counts," he insists. His friends cheer. You roll your eyes and keep walking. Rome's full of men mistaking attention for affection. Some things never change. Later, at a dinner party, conversation drifts toward love and virtue. A philosopher insists that true fidelity lies in the soul, not the body. A soldier laughs. "Tell that to my wife when I'm at war." The host chimes in, "The gods gave us temptation so we wouldn't fall asleep." Everyone drinks to that. The hostess smiles politely, her eyes unreadable. As the evening deepens, you slip away from the laughter and walk out onto the balcony. Below, the city glows, lamps flickering in windows, couples arguing in alleys, 1,000 quiet betrayals blooming under the Roman moon. You realize the empire's obsession with control doesn't stop at law or politics. It tries to govern the heart, too, and fails spectacularly. There's an old story that makes you smile. A philosopher once asked a Roman matron what she thought of her husband's affairs. She shrugged. "He chases girls," she said, "but always comes home to me. The dogs bark at night, but the house is mine." That might be the most Roman answer ever given. Infidelity here isn't a crack in the system, it's part of the pattern. A reminder that beneath all the marble and moralizing, these people were achingly, beautifully human. You pass by the Temple of Venus on your way home, its steps glowing in the lamplight. Offerings litter the base, flowers, coins, perfume bottles. Someone's left a small clay tablet inscribed with a plea. "Let him forget her and return to me." The handwriting trembles. You whisper a little wish of your own for whoever wrote it. May she sleep tonight, knowing that even in a city obsessed with power and perfection, love, messy, unfaithful, forgiving love, still sneaks through the cracks. And as the wind carries the faint scent of roses from the altar, you think maybe Venus laughs at all of it. The laws, the heartbreak, the hypocrisy, because she knows what mortals never quite learn. No empire can legislate desire. Morning in Rome begins with a cry you can't ignore, a newborn wailing somewhere beyond the courtyard walls. The sound slices through the city's usual rhythm of carts and crows, and for a moment, you stop walking. Somewhere in that cry lies the heartbeat of Roman marriage. The next generation, the continuation of a family's name, fortune, and gods. You follow the sound until you find a small crowd outside a villa's door. A nursemaid appears, holding a bundle swaddled in linen. She raises it briefly to the sunlight, declaring, "It's a boy." The cheer that erupts is immediate, half relief, half triumph. Inside, the mother rests pale but smiling. Outside, her husband's friends are already talking about heirs and inheritance. Love is nice, but lineage? That's sacred. Roman marriage wasn't complete without children. The law, and the gods, demanded fertility. The Emperor Augustus himself passed the Lex Papia Papia, a set of laws rewarding couples with children and penalizing those without. 3 or more legitimate kids. Tax breaks. No kids by 40? Expect penalties and side-eye from your neighbors. Augustus wanted citizens, Rome wanted legacies. You step inside the villa, where the father now kneels beside the cradle. The nursemaid places the infant at his feet. Here comes the moment of truth. Roman fathers had jus vitae nascisque, the right of life or death. If he lifted the child, it meant acceptance. If he turned away, the baby would be exposed, left at a crossroads or temple. You hold your breath as he reaches down, lifts the child gently, and smiles. The house exhales. Another Roman joins the world. Still, you can't shake the chill that runs through you. Infanticide and exposure were grim realities, especially for the poor or for girls. Female infants were more likely to be abandoned, their worth measured in dowry potential rather than affection. Some were rescued and raised as slaves. Others vanished from record entirely. Historians still argue how common it truly was, but the silence in the sources speaks volumes. The midwife wipes her hands, muttering a prayer to Juno Lucina, goddess of childbirth. She leaves an amulet, a small phallic charm, to ward off evil spirits. You almost laugh, but the gesture is serious. Rome feared bad luck more than bad morals. In the days that follow, the newborn becomes the house's tiny sun, around which everyone orbits. The mother stays in bed for purification, while friends visit with gifts, olive oil, wool, and amulets shaped like hands. The 8th day for girls, the the 9th for boys, brings the dies lustricus, the day of naming. You attend one of these ceremonies in a crowded atrium. The father sprinkles the baby with water and speaks the chosen name aloud for the first time. Gaius, son of Gaius. A scribe writes it on a wax tablet, and the family cheers again. The mother wipes her eyes discreetly. Even the gods seem to pause for this small, sacred moment. Afterward, there's feasting. Honey cakes for luck, wine for the gods, laughter for everyone. The new parents exchange looks of quiet disbelief, as all parents do. The father jokes, "May he inherit his mother's patience and my father's wallet." Everyone laughs, though they all know he really means it. For Roman wives, motherhood is both honor and obligation. Their worth in society rises with every healthy child, especially sons. But the risk is enormous. Childbirth is dangerous, midwives uneven in skill, and medicine primitive. Many epitaphs for Roman women mention dying in childbirth, a common, heartbreaking refrain carved into stone. You walk through a necropolis later, reading tombs until one inscription stops you cold. To my wife, who died giving me life. The letters are chiseled deep, as if the husband pressed his grief straight into the marble. Back in the living world, children shape everything. They're trained early, disciplined, educated, groomed to extend the family's influence. Fathers handle sons, mothers handle daughters. A Roman boy learns law, speech, and virtue. A Roman girl learns weaving, discretion, and the art of managing servants. Both learn fear, of failure, of dishonor, of letting the family name fade. By the time a boy is 7, he accompanies his father to the forum, watching politics like another form of gladiatorial sport. By 13, he's reading Virgil. By 16, he's a man. Meanwhile, his sister's preparing for marriage. Her dolls will soon be placed on the household altar, childhood over, adulthood arranged. But between these rituals, there's affection. You watch a mother playing with her son in the garden, chasing him between fig trees, her laughter bright as the morning. You realize that even in a world ruled by duty, love still sneaks in through laughter and habit. The empire may treat children as future citizens, but their parents treat them, at least sometimes, as joy. Still, for every tender moment, there's practicality. A Roman father will remind his son that family comes before feelings. Marry wisely, he says, and keep your household strong. You imagine the son nodding dutifully, unaware that he's hearing a curse disguised as advice. In poorer districts, the rhythm is rougher but just as fierce. You visit a tenement where a mother balances a baby on one hip while stirring porridge with the other. Her husband repairs sandals by the doorway, pausing now and then to kiss the child's head. They have no legal contracts or property to pass down, but their pride is the same: survival. Each small victory, a full meal, a healthy child, feels monumental. One old woman nearby tells you she had 7 children. 3 lived, she says simply, and the gods were merciful. Her face is calm, her tone matter-of-fact. In this world, grief is folded into daily life like flour into bread. As evening falls, you return to the villa where the newborn sleeps. The nurse hums softly, her voice almost like a prayer. The parents sit nearby, exhausted but content. You look at them and realize, this is Rome at its most human. Not the Senate, not the legions, but this quiet miracle repeated in every home: a child's first breath, a parent's cautious hope. Tomorrow, the boy will grow another day older, and his parents will resume their endless duties. But tonight, they just watch him sleep, candlelight flickering against his tiny fists. You step outside, and the night air feels warmer somehow. You can hear another baby crying somewhere, another life just beginning. The empire stretches on, stone, law, and blood, and at its heart lies this fragile thread, family. Because for all Rome's laws and empires, all its conquests and cruelty, everything it builds begins the same way, in the arms of a mother whispering to her child beneath the eternal hum of the city. The morning smells of myrrh and melted wax. Bells from a nearby temple ring out, echoing through the narrow streets, each sound rolling like warm wine through the city. You follow the procession of women in white veils, carrying olive branches and small clay lamps. They move slowly, singing soft hymns to the goddess Juno, protector of marriage, childbirth, and the eternal glue that holds Roman households together. Religion, in Rome, isn't separate from daily life, it is daily life. Every doorway hides a shrine, every act of love or argument has a god peering over its shoulder. For married couples, faith isn't a choice, it's the third partner in their union. You arrive at the temple steps. The air is thick with incense and whispered vows. A young wife kneels before a small statue of Juno Lucina, laying down a honey cake and murmuring a prayer. Bless my womb, strengthen our bond, grant peace to our house. Her husband stands a few feet behind her, pretending not to fidget. Even he knows better than to interrupt. Inside, the temple glows gold from torchlight. A priestess in flowing linen gestures for offerings, flowers, coins, and the occasional desperate plea written on scraps of papyrus. You notice how many are from women asking not for wealth or beauty, but for affection, for children, for safety. Marriage here may be practical, but even practicality needs hope to survive. When she rises, the priestess dips her fingers in oil and traces a circle on the woman's forehead. Juno hears those who serve faithfully, she says. The woman smiles faintly. Faith is its own comfort, even when the gods are silent. Back outside, a group of men wait by the fountain, joking about sacrifices and dowries. Offer Juno a fat calf, one says, and she'll give you a fertile wife. His friend laughs. Or an expensive one. The laughter rings hollow. They still toss coins into the water anyway. Religion wraps every layer of Roman marriage like silk around marble. The household itself is sacred. The family shrine, the lararium, holds tiny statues of ancestors and gods. Each morning, the wife lights incense there, whispering thanks for survival and harmony. Each evening, she leaves offerings of grain or wine, just enough to remind the divine that she's still paying attention. You visit one such home later, where the couple prays together before dinner. The wife lifts a small cup of wine, the husband lays his hand on her shoulder. To Concordia, he says, to the goddess of harmony. To peace between us, she replies softly. You can tell it's not just ritual, it's also repair. A way of resetting the day's small frictions before they fester. Roman religion, for all its pomp, is deeply domestic. The same gods who rule the heavens also watch the kitchen fire. The Penates protect the pantry, the Laras guard the home's threshold. The hearth flame, tended by the wife, is literally divine, an ember of Vesta's eternal fire. If it goes out, it's not just bad housekeeping, it's a bad omen. Historians still argue whether Roman belief was true faith or social theater. Maybe both. People prayed to keep up appearances, but also because the alternative, silence from the gods, was unbearable. You see it in every face at the temple, the fear that one missed offering could unravel everything. Among the elite, religion doubles as performance. Weddings, births, and anniversaries are excuses for lavish sacrifices. But beneath the marble altars and gilded statues, the emotions are genuine. You watch a senator's wife offer a dove for her husband's health, eyes red from sleepless nights. Piety might be public, but sincerity is private. Further out, in the poorer quarters, the same faith takes simpler form. A baker's wife keeps a clay figurine of Venus on a shelf above her oven. Every morning, before kneading dough, she whispers, "Let the bread rise, and may my husband's temper fall." You grin. It's a prayer equal parts devotion and negotiation. You visit a small temple of Venus next, its walls painted with fading scenes of love and laughter. Inside, a priestess teaches young wives charms to rekindle affection, burning herbs, whispering poems, placing laurel leaves under pillows. "Love is a guest," she says. "You must keep the door open." A few women giggle, but most take notes. Faith and folklore blend seamlessly here. And then there's superstition, the secret underbelly of Roman religion. Wives tie amulets to their husbands' sandals to keep them faithful. Husbands leave coins under pillows to protect against envy. Some wear rings inscribed with Amor vincit omnia. Love conquers all, half romantic, half insurance. You suspect the gods appreciate the entertainment. As dusk falls, the temple bells ring again. You wander through the forum, where torches flicker and smoke curls into violet sky. Couples drift past, arm in arm, their steps slow and deliberate. You catch fragments of whispered prayers, "Keep him safe, bless her womb, let us stay whole." You pause before a public altar glowing in the dark. Its carvings show two clasped hands beneath a veil, the dextrarum iunctio, the ancient symbol of marital unity. Someone has left a fresh garland of roses there, still dewy from the garden. You can almost hear the echo of wedding vows in the stone. Religion, you realize, gives structure to Roman love. It doesn't guarantee happiness, but it keeps chaos at bay. Every prayer, every ritual, is a small defiance against uncertainty, a way of saying, "We are still here. We are still trying." The night deepens. The couple you saw earlier returns home, their hands brushing in the lamplight. At their household altar, the wife lights a taper and murmurs a final invocation. The flame catches, steady and soft, reflecting in her eyes. You think of all the homes across the empire doing the same thing right now. Millions of small fires flickering in unison. The empire's real power isn't its legions or its laws. It's these tiny lights, these quiet gestures of belief that hold the darkness back. As you leave, the air smells faintly of smoke and lavender. Somewhere behind you, a prayer rises like a sigh. "Let the gods forgive what we cannot fix." You smile, because that sounds more human than divine. And in Rome, that's close enough. The next morning, the city feels different. The air is heavy with the smell of sea salt and spices, carried inland from the port at Ostia. The chatter in the streets isn't just Latin, it's Greek, Egyptian, Punic, even Celtic. The empire stretches far beyond the 7 hills now, and so do its marriages. You leave Rome behind for a while, boarding a creaking cart bound for the provinces. As the city fades into olive groves and rolling hills, you feel the empire's pulse spread wider, softer, more diverse. What was once purely Roman now mingles with 1,000 other traditions. Love, it turns out, travels better than armies. Your first stop is Egypt, jewel of the Nile and breadbasket of the empire. Alexandria glitters in the sunlight, its marble colonnades buzzing with traders and scholars. Here, marriage wears a different face, Greek by custom, Egyptian by soul, Roman by law. You visit a home near the harbor where a local woman named Teramitas prepares for her wedding. She's dressed not in Roman white, but in linen dyed with saffron. Around her neck hang charms shaped like the goddess Isis, protector of marriage and motherhood. Her fiancé, Lucius, a Roman official stationed in the city, waits outside, nervously adjusting his toga. Their union will be registered by Roman law, but the ceremony blends everything: Roman vows, Egyptian blessings, Greek music. 3 cultures, 1 promise. Inside, the priest of Isis pours milk and honey onto the altar, murmuring words older than Rome itself. The couple joins hands, and the priest ties a thread around their wrists, saying, "May your hearts be bound like the reeds of the Nile." It's simple, beautiful, and utterly un-Roman, and yet, somehow, it works. You watch their faces: cautious joy, quiet hope. The empire may claim to rule the world, but in moments like this, it's the world that reshapes Rome. Historians still argue how much local custom Rome truly tolerated. Some claim it imposed uniform laws, others see evidence of flexibility. What's clear is that provincial marriages blurred every border. A Roman soldier could wed a Gallic woman, a Syrian merchant might take a Greek wife. Their children would grow up speaking 3 languages, half citizens, half something else. You travel next to Gaul, where the air smells of rain and pine. In a small village near Lugdunum, a Roman merchant marries a local woman whose family still honors Celtic gods. Their wedding feast is wild and loud: drums, laughter, roasted boar, and enough mead to drown the moon. Before the ceremony, she circles a fire 3 times, scattering barley and salt for good fortune. He stands awkwardly beside her, mumbling Latin vows he barely understands. When she kisses him after, the crowd cheers so loudly you swear the Alps shake. Later that night, under a sky swollen with stars, they sit together outside the tent, hands tangled, grinning like fools. You think about how this empire absorbs everything: gods, foods, and even love stories. Roman marriage law may dictate property and inheritance, but the heart refuses to stay confined to parchment. Back in the East, in Antioch, you see another twist of tradition. A Jewish couple exchanges rings beneath a canopy while Roman officials look on. Their vows are written in Aramaic, their contract recorded in Latin. The empire keeps its paperwork tidy, even when the people don't. A priest nearby mutters, "The gods have many languages, but the tax office prefers Latin." You laugh, then realize he isn't joking. Not every cross-cultural marriage ends peacefully. Some Romans view them with suspicion, muttering about barbarian blood. Yet over time, those unions become the empire's quiet glue. Soldiers stationed for decades marry local women, raise families, and settle. The legions bring discipline, their wives bring permanence. In a dusty frontier fort in Britannia, you meet one such couple. He's a weary centurion, she's a Briton with a soft accent and sharper wit. Their home smells of peat smoke and wet wool. On the wall hangs a small altar, half Roman, half native. Venus shares space with a carved stone goddess of fertility, her round face smiling faintly through the candlelight. Over dinner, the wife teases him, "You Romans think you conquered us, but I conquered you first." He grins, chewing his bread. "You used sorcery." "No," she replies, "just kindness." You can tell which spell worked better. Even at the empire's edges, the patterns hold. Children carry Roman names but provincial hearts. They learn Latin from their fathers and lullabies from their mothers. These mixed families become living proof that Rome's real conquest wasn't through the sword, but through marriage. There's a strange comfort in that thought. Empires crumble, but families, those tiny empires of 2, survive everything. You travel back toward Italy, passing through Greece. In Corinth, a wedding spills into the streets. The bride wears a crown of ivy and sings hymns to Aphrodite. The groom recites Roman vows, his voice shaky with emotion. As the crowd cheers, someone shouts, "May Eros and Venus never argue in your house." You think it's the most realistic blessing you've heard yet. By the time you return to Rome, you understand something profound. The empire may stretch from Spain to Syria, but its marriages are a mosaic, each one carrying traces of the local soil, the local gods, and the universal longing to belong. You pass through the city gates at dusk. Smoke curls from 100 chimneys, each one belonging to a home where someone is praying, cooking, arguing, or loving. Every province, every class, every accent, all gathered here, layered like Rome's own history. Maybe that's why the empire feels eternal. It isn't the marble or the armies, it's the quiet, unrecorded act of two people joining lives under the gaze of their gods. You pause by the Tiber, where lamps flicker on the water's surface like scattered stars. Somewhere upriver, another wedding begins. You can almost hear the vows, half Latin, half local tongue, braided together like reeds in the current. The river flows onward, carrying whispers of every promise ever made under Roman skies. And you, standing on the bank, realize that the empire isn't just geography, it's the sum of all these small, stubborn acts of connection. The empire stretches, the legions march, and centuries move forward like a long breath. But marriage in Rome keeps its pulse, steady and unbroken. Now though, the air smells faintly different. Frankincense, not just myrrh. Crosses, not just laurel crowns. The old gods are whispering less loudly, and a new faith is beginning to stir in their place. You wake one morning to the sound of distant singing, not the raucous songs of taverns or the hymns to Venus, but something gentler, more secretive. You follow it through twisting alleyways until you find a small group gathered in a candlelit room beneath the city streets. Catacombs. The worshippers speak softly, calling one another brothers and sisters. At their center stands a man in a plain tunic, holding a loaf of bread. He talks about love, not Eros, not Venus, but a love that binds souls, not bodies. He blesses a newly married couple, their faces shy in the dim light. "Let your bond be as Christ and the Church," he says. The words sound strange in your ears, foreign yet comforting. It's a revolution whispered in domestic tones. Christian marriage is still young, uncertain, and quietly radical. Unlike Rome's legal unions, it isn't about property or lineage but about faithfulness and mutual devotion. The idea that a man should love his wife as himself, that's new, and maybe dangerous. Outside, the empire still worships Jupiter and Juno, but change always starts in hidden corners. You see it spreading like a soft light across the provinces. Soldiers, slaves, merchants, and matrons all drawn to the promise that marriage could be sacred, not just social. In the older world, love was duty. Here, it starts to sound like grace. You return above ground, blinking into the sunlight. On the street, a statue of Juno still stands, her marble smile unbothered. A few steps away, someone's carved a small cross into the base, discreet but unmistakable. Rome, you realize, is becoming two cities at once. One devoted to tradition, one to transformation. A few days later, you attend a traditional Roman wedding. It's everything you've seen before: bright fabrics, formal vows, laughter that feels rehearsed. But this time, the mood feels different. Whispers circulate about the growing Christian sects, about marriages performed without priests or sacrifices. The older guests scoff, the younger ones listen too closely. The bride glances toward the ceiling during the prayers to Juno, as though she's thinking of someone else entirely. Historians still argue how early Christianity truly began reshaping family life. What's clear is that by the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Roman households started to look less like dynasties and more like spiritual partnerships. Husbands were urged to love rather than command. Wives were told they were not possessions but partners before God. For an empire built on hierarchy, that was almost blasphemy. You walk through a villa where an older couple discusses their daughter's upcoming marriage. The father grumbles about dowries and contracts. The mother interrupts softly, she wants to marry for faith. The father scoffs, faith doesn't feed a family. But his wife's eyes are distant, thoughtful. Maybe it feeds something else. Even among the poor, the shift is visible. In a dark tenement room, you see a Christian couple kneel together before eating. Their prayer is short: gratitude, humility, and one simple promise: to endure. You notice how quiet their love feels, compared to the grand rituals above ground. No sacrifices, no spectators, no noise. Just two people surviving the empire together, believing that survival itself might be holy. The idea of fidelity, once just a legal requirement, takes on new weight now. It's not about ownership anymore. It's about imitation. To be faithful, they say, is to mirror divine constancy. A marriage becomes not just a civic duty but a small temple, a microcosm of the sacred. You can almost hear the old gods rolling their eyes. But not everyone welcomes the change. Roman law still recognizes only civil marriages, and Christian unions exist in a gray space, legitimate before God, suspicious before government. Some couples keep both rituals, one for the city's records, one for their souls. Rome, ever pragmatic, shrugs and carries on. You find yourself watching one such couple one evening. Their home is small but warm, lit by a single lamp. The husband reads from a scrap of parchment. The wife mends a torn cloak beside him. "Love is patient," he says aloud. "Love is kind." She looks up, smiling faintly. "You think the gods will forgive our quiet ceremony?" He shakes his head. "We don't need their forgiveness." Then, after a pause, "We just need each other." That's when it hits you. This quiet defiance, this insistence on meaning, it's the seed of something massive. A shift not just in religion, but in what marriage itself means. No longer a contract of inheritance, no longer a legal merger, but a covenant of hearts. The empire doesn't know it yet, but its oldest institution is being rewritten from within. Later, walking through the dark streets, you pass a shrine that once held offerings to Juno. The altar is cracked, the statue missing a hand. Someone has placed a small clay fish at its base, a Christian symbol, half hidden in shadow. You touch it gently. It's still damp, newly made. The wind picks up, carrying the smell of olive smoke and incense. You think of all the Roman wives who've prayed for love, loyalty, or forgiveness over the centuries. Maybe their prayers were finally being answered, just in a different language. As you return toward the Tiber, you look back at the flickering lamplight spilling from the homes. For all the faiths and empires and laws that come and go, the scene never changes. Two figures beside a fire, sharing food, whispering promises into the night. Maybe that's what lasts, not the gods, not the names, not even Rome itself, but the endless human impulse to reach across the dark and say, "You and I, we'll try again tomorrow." And you realize, with a soft smile, that in a world built on conquest, love remains the quietest rebellion of all. The empire is older now, wiser in some ways, crueler in others. The marble is cracked, the streets patched with dust, but life goes on. You wander through a quieter Rome, one where the old grandeur hums beneath the surface like a memory half forgotten. And yet, in the homes and hearts of its people, marriage remains the same ancient tug-of-war: duty and desire, control and companionship, survival and tenderness. You find yourself walking through a villa that smells faintly of olive oil and parchment. Inside, a married couple in their 50s sits by the hearth, their conversation as soft as the firelight. His hair is streaked with gray, his eyes tired but kind. Hers are sharp and curious, the kind of eyes that have seen enough to know when silence says more than speech. This is what Roman marriage looks like after 20, 30 years. The performance is long over. What remains is partnership. They've learned each other's tempers, rhythms, and small mercies. He finishes her sentences. She rolls her eyes in perfect time. You sense the comfort of familiarity. Less passion, more peace. The husband dictates a letter to his scribe, complaining about politics. The wife interrupts occasionally with reminders: "Don't forget to thank your cousin for the figs," or "You should mention the governor's daughter's engagement." Each suggestion is practical, diplomatic, and a little manipulative. You almost laugh. Historians still argue whether Roman wives were politically powerless. Watching this, you'd say they just learned subtlety better than senators. They eat together later, quietly. No elaborate feast, just bread, cheese, figs, and wine. Afterward, they feed the household birds, a ritual they've done since their wedding day. When one bird refuses to eat, she clicks her tongue, muttering, "Old fool." He chuckles. "Talking to me, or the bird?" "Both," she says without looking up. The humor is tender, worn smooth by decades of repetition. You realize the Romans didn't invent marriage, they just perfected its contradictions. Outside, younger couples pass by. A newly married pair argues in the street over the price of olive oil. Another walks hand in hand, too in love to care that the cobblestones are filthy. Every generation thinks it's reinventing love, but the same patterns repeat, dressed in different fabrics. The older couple's children visit the next morning, a son in a senator's toga, a daughter with 2 toddlers in tow. The house fills with laughter, spilled milk, and overlapping voices. The husband beams at his grandchildren, pretending not to notice the chaos. His wife just smiles knowingly. She's the one who keeps it all together. For the Romans, old age doesn't mean retirement, it means reputation. The couple's marriage, once a private affair, has become a public example. Neighbors cite them as harmonious, meaning they've survived without scandal or divorce. It's the empire's version of sainthood. Still, they remember their own battles. When the grandchildren nap, the wife picks up her spindle and says quietly, "You once threatened to divorce me over a dinner argument." He laughs. "You burned the lamb. You insulted my mother." A fair exchange. Their eyes meet, half amusement, half apology that never needed words. In truth, Rome's laws have grown gentler toward long-standing unions. The empire now values stability more than perfection. Even emperors boast of their marriages lasting decades. Emperor Antoninus Pius, for instance, was so devoted to his wife Faustina that he had her deified after her death. The Senate rolled its eyes, but the gesture stuck. Temples, statues, coins, her face everywhere, serene and eternal. You see the influence of that example, even here. When the husband leaves for the forum, his wife lights incense at the household shrine, not out of fear, but gratitude. She prays not to Juno anymore, but to a small private mixture of old and new faiths. The ancestors, Christ, Fortuna. Rome's religion, like its marriages, adapts quietly to time. Later that evening, a friend visits, another matron, talkative and warm. They share wine and gossip. "Do you miss being young?" the friend asks. The wife smiles faintly. "No. We were foolish then. Now, at least, we're only forgetful." They laugh, clinking their cups. Outside, the Tiber glows bronze in the fading light. The city hums softly, slower now, its grandeur mellowed by memory. You realize how time itself reshapes marriage here. The sharp edges dull, the power games soften into rituals of care. Maybe love doesn't fade, it just learns new manners. You walk with the husband later as he tends to the family tomb, cleaning the marble faces of long-dead ancestors. "She'll outlive me," he says, almost fondly. "She always wins our arguments." He places a flower before one niche and adds, "If she joins me here someday, I'll finally get the last word." You laugh, and so does he, the sound echoing softly among the stones. Historians still debate how genuinely affectionate Roman marriages were, but the letters and epitaphs tell their own story. A husband writes, "We lived in harmony for 40 years without quarrel." Another, "She was my joy, my comfort, my counsel." The words feel restrained by convention, but you can sense the ache between the lines, the love that had to stay polite. As night settles, the couple sits together on their terrace, overlooking the quiet city. Lanterns flicker below, dogs bark in the distance, and the faint smell of figs drifts up from the gardens. He reaches for her hand. She lets him. No grand gestures, no speeches, just the slow comfort of two lives aligned by time. Somewhere in another villa, a young couple begins their first argument. In another, an old one ends their last. The empire may crumble someday, but this, the rhythm of companionship, the small jokes, the shared silences, will outlast marble and law alike. You lean against the terrace wall, watching the stars appear. The husband dozes off mid-sentence. The wife covers him with his cloak before whispering a prayer. She doesn't need temples or gods to know what devotion feels like. And as the night deepens, you realize that for all Rome's obsession with power and permanence, the truest immortality lies here. In the quiet love of two people who keep choosing each other, even after the ceremonies have ended and the gods have gone home. The night before the festival smells of wine and smoke. From the forum to the farthest alleys, the city hums with restless energy. Musicians tuning flutes, cooks roasting lambs, children chasing each other through torchlight. Tomorrow is the Matronalia, the annual celebration of wives, mothers, and everything Rome pretends to understand about women. You wake to the sound of drums and laughter. The sky above the rooftops glows pink, and garlands of laurel hang from every doorway. The streets fill with women in bright veils, each carrying flowers to the temple of Juno Lucina. It's their one day of official honor, and they intend to enjoy it. At home, husbands rise early to greet their wives with small gifts, perfume, ribbons, or, if they're feeling especially generous, a day without criticism. The law doesn't demand it. Custom does. Wives, in turn, pray for their husband's virtue and their own patience. It's a beautiful exchange, if a little ironic. You follow a group of matrons toward the Esquiline Hill, where the temple's marble steps gleam in the morning light. The air smells of incense and roses. One woman beside you adjusts her veil and mutters, "For one day a year, we're goddesses. Tomorrow, back to laundry." You laugh softly. She doesn't. Inside, Priestesses sprinkle flower petals over the altar while a line of women offers cakes and coins. They murmur blessings for their homes, their children, their tempers. One whispers, "Let him snore less." Another adds, "Or at least snore where I can't hear it." You can't help but grin. The Matronalia began as a celebration of marriage and childbirth, honoring the peace between the Sabine women and their Roman husbands after the infamous abduction legend centuries earlier. Historians still argue whether the festival celebrated reconciliation or submission. Either way, it stuck, and became one of the few times women could take over the streets without scandal. When the ceremony ends, the women gather outside, chatting like old friends. A few hand out flowers to passing strangers, men, slaves, even foreigners. It's a ritual of goodwill, soft and fleeting, like perfume on the air. Later, in homes across the city, the roles reverse. Husbands serve their wives meals, pour their wine, and pretend not to notice the servants smirking at the novelty of it. In one villa, a senator clumsily slices bread while his wife watches in amused silence. "How hard can it be?" he mutters, cutting the loaf sideways. She takes the knife gently from his hand. Harder than politics, apparently. In another home, a young husband reads a poem to his new wife, something he's written himself, full of praise and slightly too much rhyme. She blushes anyway. Across town, an older couple simply sit side by side, sharing dates and memories. The city, for one day, seems a little softer. You wander to the forum later, where public games are underway. Crowds cheer as dancers in veils perform for the goddess. Men toss coins, children chase each other through the colonnades, and vendors shout about garlands, fit for Juno herself. The energy feels less like worship and more like collective release. In a quiet corner, you see a small, informal ceremony, a group of freed women thanking Venus for their marriages. They laugh louder than anyone else, unashamed of their joy. "We earned this," one says, holding her husband's hand. Her voice carries more truth than any priest's blessing. As dusk approaches, the festival winds down. Lamps flicker to life along the streets, and the smell of feasting fills the air. Stewed lentils, roasted fish, honeyed pastries. You pause outside a humble tenement where a wife serves her husband dinner. He raises his cup, smiling. "To my matron." She laughs, shaking her head. "You just like the food." "That too," he admits. It's easy to romanticize it all, but beneath the laughter, the old tensions remain. One day of celebration doesn't undo a lifetime of hierarchy. Still, you can feel something genuine in the air. Mutual respect, however temporary. The Romans might not have believed in equality, but they did understand gratitude, at least when reminded by a holiday. As night deepens, the city glows with torchlight. Couples stroll through the gardens of the Palatine, the air thick with the scent of jasmine. Some argue softly, others hold hands. The same vows echo across every social class: "Let there be peace between us." You stop by a fountain where a group of wives toss coins into the water, making small wishes. "May my husband live long," says one. "May mine listen," says another. "May mine stop talking," says a third, and they all burst into laughter. Nearby, a husband places a wreath on his wife's head and says, "For all the patience you've given me." She smiles, touches the wreath, and murmurs, "Then I must be immortal." Historians note how festivals like the Matronalia served as subtle social pressure valves, a chance for wives to feel honored, for husbands to appear virtuous, for tension to melt into tradition. But you sense something deeper. Beneath the rituals lies a simple truth. People need to pause, to remember why they endure each other, why they keep building lives together even when the empire itself forgets to care. The music fades. The torches burn low. Somewhere, a drunk poet serenades a woman who's clearly not impressed. A slave girl dances for herself in the shadow of a column, smiling freely for once. You wander home through the quiet streets, the last scent of incense clinging to your clothes. The stars over Rome flicker faintly, their reflections rippling on the Tiber below. Tomorrow, everything will go back to normal. The duties, the expectations, the careful balancing act of Roman marriage. But tonight, for a few golden hours, the empire remembered tenderness. And maybe that's all any civilization ever needs to survive. One day, every so often, to remind itself what love feels like when it isn't an obligation. You pass a final shrine on your way home, the goddess's face dim in the lamplight. Someone's left a handful of flowers there, wilted but fragrant. A whisper in the air seems to say, "Peace in the home, peace in the heart." You smile and keep walking. Because in Rome, even love, tired, flawed, and fleeting, was worth a festival. Morning again, but this time it feels quieter. The city hums at a slower rhythm, like an old musician still remembering the tune but not quite rushing to play it. Rome, once the restless bride of ambition, has become a widow of empires, still standing, still proud, but a little weary. You walk along cracked marble streets where ivy curls through broken temples, and the statues of old gods stare down at you with that half-forgotten smugness of the past. The empire is fading, but the home, the domus, still endures. And inside, marriage continues, though its meaning has shifted yet again. You find yourself in a modest house near the Forum Boreum, where a couple sits at breakfast in the cool dawn. The husband is a craftsman, hands scarred from years of shaping wood and metal. The wife, a teacher's daughter, reads aloud from a worn scroll while stirring a pot of lentils. It's not Virgil or Ovid this time, it's something different. Words of comfort, written by bishops and monks, speaking of love as sacrifice, not conquest. Christianity isn't just tolerated now, it's the empire's soul. He listens quietly, nodding, sipping wine cut with water. "It's strange," he says. "When I was a boy, my father said a wife should obey. Now they say I must love as Christ loved." She smirks gently. "That sounds like more work for you." He laughs, and the sound fills the little house like sunlight. The new religion has reshaped Roman marriage from the ground up. Once, the union was about property, lineage, and civic duty. Now it's about faith, fidelity, and something new to the Roman tongue, mutual salvation. Love isn't just a bond, it's a path to heaven. You almost miss the sarcasm of the old poets, but part of you feels the quiet relief too. Historians still argue whether Christian marriage truly improved women's lives. The records suggest mixed results. It offered spiritual equality but reinforced domestic submission. A wife was now virtuosa instead of pudica, chaste in spirit, not just obedient in law. She could claim moral authority, even when she lacked legal power. Progress, Roman style. 2 steps forward, 1 toga backward. In the small church across the street, a wedding is beginning. You step inside. Gone are the laurel crowns, the orange veils, the loud banquets. The room smells of wax and old wood. The couple stands before a priest, heads bowed. He blesses them, speaking words no Roman of the Republic would have understood. "What God has joined together, let no man separate." You glance around. No dowry contracts, no witnesses with scrolls, just family and neighbors, singing softly. The ceremony feels stripped bare, but there's something intimate about it. When the groom lifts his wife's veil, the gesture doesn't announce ownership, it reveals partnership. They kiss, awkward and shy, and the priest smiles. The crowd claps softly. Outside, the priest explains that marriage is now a sacrament, a holy covenant, not a transaction. It's a promise, he says, to see the divine in each other, even when it's hardest. You wonder how many Romans throughout history would have traded their laws and ledgers for words like that. The couple leaves the church, greeted by handfuls of wheat tossed for fertility. Children chase after them, shouting blessings. The bride laughs, her voice bright against the morning air. You realize that joy, though centuries old, never really changed its sound. Later, in a nearby villa, an elderly widow tends her garden. Her husband died years ago, but she still wears her wedding ring, a simple iron band that's darkened with time. She talks to you as she trims a fig tree. "We were married 50 years. He was stern, but kind. I never feared him." She pauses. "That used to be rare." You nod, feeling the weight of her understatement. Rome has changed, but the traces of the old world remain everywhere. In the mosaics of long-dead goddesses, in the marble reliefs showing brides and grooms clasping hands. Even in Christian homes, the gesture of joining right hands, the dextrarum iunctio, still appears on rings and carvings. The body forgets slower than the mind. You wander through the ruins of an ancient temple later, where weeds grow between toppled columns. On one wall, barely visible, is a faint inscription, Ubi tu Gaius, ego Gaia. The same vow whispered centuries earlier, still clinging to the stone like breath. You trace the words with your fingers, half expecting to hear the echo of laughter, music, the rustle of silk veils. And you do, at least in memory. The ghosts of old weddings seem to hover here, lingering just behind the breeze. You picture the bride stepping over the threshold, the groom offering her fire and water, the laughter of guests, the clatter of goblets. All gone, and yet, not gone. Every love story leaves fingerprints, even when the marble fades. As dusk falls, the bells of the Christian church ring across the valley. The sound overlaps with something older, the distant whisper of wind through the ruined temples of Juno and Venus. For a heartbeat, the two worlds coexist, old and new, God and God, Rome and whatever comes after. The city seems to exhale, as though it knows it's not eternal after all. The empire will crumble, the legions will vanish, the marble will turn to dust. But love, in all its stubborn forms, will slip through the cracks and keep going. You sit by the river as twilight deepens, watching lamps flicker to life along the far bank. Somewhere, a newly married couple crosses a bridge hand in hand. They don't look like emperors or saints, just people, tired and hopeful, like every couple before them. And you realize, the real continuity of Rome isn't in its laws or monuments, it's in this endless act of trying, failing, forgiving, and beginning again. From pagan rites to Christian vows, from orange veils to white gowns, marriage has always been Rome's most ordinary miracle. The river glides quietly under the bridge, carrying reflections of 1,000 tiny lights. The sound is steady, eternal. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the city's last whisper to itself. Empires fall. Promises don't. You wake to silence. Not the silence of sleep or peace, but that deep, cathedral kind of quiet that comes after a storm has finally ended. Rome is no longer the Rome you first walked through. The marble is dust, the temples are shells, the forum is half swallowed by earth. Crows perch where senators once argued, and grass pushes through the cracks of triumphal arches. Yet, In the soft light of dawn, the ruins still glow faintly golden. The empire is gone, but life hasn't left. You can hear it in the distance. The steady clatter of hooves, the ring of bells, the murmur of monks at prayer. A new world has replaced the old one, but the same human rituals still shape its rhythm. And at the heart of them, like a pulse refusing to die, marriage remains. You follow a winding path through what used to be the Palatine Hill. The grand villas are crumbling now, their mosaics fading into dust. But inside one, rebuilt into a small chapel, a wedding is taking place. The couple stands in front of a wooden cross, surrounded by candlelight. There are no senators here, no slaves, no poets, just neighbors, friends, and a priest whose robe smells faintly of rain. The bride's dress is simple linen, the groom's hands are rough from work. They exchange vows in a language that isn't quite Latin anymore. The words are simpler, but the meaning hasn't changed. When he says, "I am yours," you realize you've heard it 1,000 times before. In temples, in villas, in back-alley ceremonies and candlelit catacombs. The words have changed shape across the centuries, but the promise behind them never did. Afterward, the couple shares bread and wine, not as citizens of an empire, but as two people simply grateful to have survived the ruins of one. Their friends sing softly, and the sound fills the chapel until the old stones seem to remember the laughter they once held. You step outside, the air cool and clear. From the hill, you can see the whole city, shattered but still alive. Birds dart between broken columns, and in the distance, smoke rises from chimneys. Someone's cooking bread. Someone's rocking a baby. Someone's whispering a promise beside a fire. Rome isn't marble anymore, it's memory. And memory, you realize, is the most enduring architecture of all. Historians will later argue about the empire's fall. Who caused it, when it happened, whether it truly ended or just changed its name. But none of them can deny what survived. The structure of Roman marriage, the vows, the household rituals, the expectation of partnership, carried forward into every village, every church, every language that would come after. The empire taught the world how to love in contract, but also, eventually, how to love in choice. You wander down to the riverbank one last time. The Tiber moves slower now, heavy with silt, but still steady. A fisherman waves as you pass. On the far shore, you see another couple walking home, hand in hand, laughing about something too small for history to remember. And yet, you know that's the kind of thing history was always built on. You think back to every moment you've seen, the orange-veiled bride stepping over thresholds, the whispered prayers to Juno, the feasts, the divorces, the quiet reconciliations in candlelight. You remember the women who outmaneuvered their husbands, the men who learned softness too late, the lovers who met across boundaries of class and language. Together they built something more powerful than empire: endurance. The great experiment of Roman marriage, its beauty, its control, its chaos, didn't die with Rome. It slipped quietly into the bloodstream of humanity. You can still feel it today in every promise whispered at an altar, every argument that ends in laughter, every morning someone reaches across a bed and says, "We'll try again." You sit on a fragment of fallen column, the stone cool beneath your palms. The wind carries the smell of grass and smoke. Somewhere behind you, a bell rings, slow, rhythmic, reassuring. You close your eyes. The centuries fold in on themselves. The voices of the past rise again, 1,000 brides and grooms murmuring through time, "Where you are Gaius, I am Gaia." In faith and fortune, in sickness and in health. Forever. The words blur together, no longer Latin, no longer any language at all. just the sound of humanity refusing to stop believing in connection. You breathe in, slowly. The city exhales with you. The sun climbs higher, lighting the ruins, turning the broken marble into soft gold one more time. For a moment, Rome feels eternal again, not because of its monuments, but because of the hearts that beat inside them. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it, the quiet rhythm of domestic life echoing through eternity, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of prayers, the soft laughter of two people deciding, in spite of everything, to keep going together. So now, as the echoes of Rome fade into the distance, take a deep breath. Let the weight of marble and memory melt away. Picture the city at dusk, columns glowing, rooftops catching the last light, the river sighing beneath its bridges. Somewhere out there, a lamp still burns in a small home, its flame steady against the wind. That's where our story ends, not in the Senate or the battlefield, but in that quiet place where two people share the same light. The empire may have fallen, but the warmth of love, the ordinary miracle of partnership, still flickers on. You can almost hear the sounds now, the crackle of the hearth, the faint rustle of linen, the sleepy murmur of someone saying good night. Outside, the wind drifts through cypress trees, carrying centuries of whispers, of brides laughing, of children crying, of promises made and kept. Let it lull you. Let it settle the noise in your head. You've walked through the heart of an ancient world, seen its ceremonies, its contradictions, its tenderness beneath the marble. And through it all, one truth has survived. People are people, no matter the century. So close your eyes. Picture the glow of oil lamps fading to embers. The stars overhead look down on the ruins, soft and patient, the same way they once watched over Rome in all its glory. The same way they watch over you now. And as you drift, remember this: civilizations rise and fall, but kindness endures. Empires crumble, but love hums quietly in the dark, forever rebuilding what history breaks. Good night, traveler of time. May your dreams be peaceful, and your heart, like Rome's flame, eternal.